Chapter 130. There is such a thing. Zhong Shou's words were concise as he looked deeply at Lei Dong. I only feel a little weird. Since my big brother Lei Dong came from Wujua Villa, why can't he comprehend that a mountain is still a mountain and water is still water? If he knew that this person had such an illustrious background, he wouldn't have said so much. He also found it weird, the two of them looked similar, they should be blood relatives. Since they were uncle and nephew, why didn't they have the same surname? Wujua Villa specialized in sword techniques, but Lei Dong cultivated in knife techniques and also had such a conning surname. At that time, he really thought that this fellow was a factionless cultivator with no backing. Lei Dong laughed awkwardly, touching his nose as he looked up at the sky. Yan Fan didn't care at all. Prince, don't be angry. Dong took his mother's surname, which is why his surname is Lei. This fellow was angry with me in the early years and left home, giving up on the sword to learn the knife. He said that he didn't want to rely on our Wujua Villa and would pave his own path. Speaking of which, I have to thank you this time. If it wasn't for you, who knows when he would be willing to come and meet me? Zhong Shoksan was enlightened, the anger in his chest calming down. However, he still stared furiously at Lei Dong. It wasn't because of his background, but because he knew that this fellow definitely had a part to play in today's matter. Lei Dong seemed to know that he was in the wrong, his expression helpless as he bowed towards Zhong Shou. If it wasn't for this Taiyuan fairy matter, why would he reveal that stone? He also wouldn't need to invite his uncle out. He originally wanted to keep that stone for himself as a family heirloom. Suddenly, he had an idea, raising a wine jug in his hand, his right hand forming a 3. 100 feet away, Zhong Shou could smell a refreshing wine fragrance. It was even better than the half-step shake that day. It was obvious that it was a celestial brew. Thinking back to that day when he drank a bowl of wine and got drunk, Zhong Shou couldn't help but be filled with rage. His hand faced Lei Dong and fiercely returned a 10 sign. Looking at Lei Dong's bitter face, he felt a little happy in his heart. Yan Fan also smiled, as if he had not noticed Zhong Shou's little trick. He casually waved his sleeves and tossed the wooden jar with the white chess pieces in front of Zhong Shou, smiling. Actually, I have seen that sword intent stone. The Crown Prince's sword Dao was already connected to the spirit at such a young age. This time, it will definitely help us solve our problems. Finish this mess. I remember that the Crown Prince has also used the Cloud Shocking God Annihilating Sword essence a few times along the way, right? Zhong Shou remained silent. He wasn't stupid enough to ask these two what they would do if he didn't want to play this game. The way he looked at Taiyuan Fairy was even more passionate than when he looked at his lover. This Yan Fan was the same. If it wasn't for the fact that he already had a wife and was extremely loving to her, he wouldn't have known. Zhong Shou almost thought that this old man's sexual orientation was abnormal. If he really opened his mouth to reject and was threatened by the two of them, then his face wouldn't look good. Scoffing coldly, Zhong Shou still activated the lightning traveling spiritual bone, crunching as he walked to the front of the chessboard. Minding his own business, he sat down cross-legged. Looking out from afar, he didn't feel anything. Now looking carefully, he only felt that in the air, there was a cloud-like sword stabbing right at him. Like in the next moment, it was going to split open his head. Samuraim's eyes sharpened, instinctively placing a white chess piece on the lower right corner of the chessboard, giving out a light "paw" sound. What was weird was that when the chess piece was placed down, the sword he saw was instantly scattered by a certain power, turning into a ball of mist. Shui Lingbo and Yan Fan couldn't help but stand up. Looking at where Zhong Shou placed the chess piece, their eyes were filled with surprise. Shui Lingbo's shrewdness was shallow. She unconsciously clenched her fist and waved it with force. To test a person's sword path attainments and talent, there was nothing better than the instant reaction at the moment of life and death. Just now, Zhong Shou's chess piece was far more perfect than what they expected. 2 times no. It wasn't even 3 or 4 times. Not only did it block the cloud sword, but it also forcefully scattered it. The moment he placed the chess piece to strike back, it was close to the sword's soul level. All of a sudden, Shui Lingbo's chest was filled with joy. So what if he had barriers from heaven and his soul was broken? She would have a way to remove all these obstacles one by one, allowing this kid to truly step onto the path of cultivation. The foundations of their Taiyuan sect couldn't be compared to Lingyun's sect, which was at the bottom of a shrine. His gaze couldn't help but become even more heated, like he wanted to burn through Zhong Shou's body. Zhao Yanran's expression changed slightly, her hand subconsciously pressing onto her sword before she regained her calmness. Just now, she only felt a strong martial path intent explode out, making her instinctively want to defend herself. At this moment, she thought to herself that as expected, during the battle at the Black Soil Swamp, this Zhong Shou really didn't go all out. If she was the one facing this chess game, she would definitely be sent flying 1,000 feet away by the recoil. Within 10 days, she wouldn't be able to cultivate. Chu Shui and Lian Fan, who were behind her, had a different reaction. The two of them couldn't feel that moment of contact. They only felt that when Zhong Shou placed the chess piece down, it was as if it had the strength to shake the heavens and earth. After the sound of the chess piece being placed down, the mist in the area thinned by at least 20%. Chu Shui couldn't help but be astonished, sizing up the chessboard once more. Her eyes blinked. Did the mist cover the sky because of this chess game? Good move. Good move. This piece was truly a marvelous move, a surprise move. It also considered the big picture. Yan Fan sighed in admiration, as if they were playing chess. He picked up a black chess piece and placed it in the center of the board. Then, how is the prince going to deal with my chess piece? Before Zhong Shou was able to wipe off the cold sweat on his forehead, he saw the mist gather once more. The cloud light was changing, hidden in the mist, appearing and disappearing as it passed through. There were no traces of it, but one could feel that danger was approaching. However, the illusion in front of him was extremely real. Zhong Shou tried his best, but he was unable to break free. Cursing out in his heart, Zhong Shou didn't hesitate to place out another chess piece, still at the bottom right corner. However, when he placed down the chess piece, Zhong Shou had already let go of all his worries. Anyways, he was forced to reveal some of his trump cards, so there was no need to purposely hide them, which was why he didn't fear anything when he spoke. Although this illusionary cloud sword is ethereal and traceless, it is too soft. Moreover, can it really be completely traceless and invisible? It isn't the true meaning of the cloud-shocking god-destroying sword art. This standard is just too average. Only to hear a light, ding sound as a white mist sword was bounced out from the mist. Without any suspense, it was smashed into pieces. When Yan Fan saw the situation, not only was he not annoyed, but a bright glow shot out from his eyes. He was unable to suppress the joy in his eyes. He nodded his head slightly. As expected, it is a little weak. Hiding in the mist is just a small path. So what if I play this move? It was the same Cloudlight illusory sword, but halfway through, it split into 4, and then into 8, all of which surged toward Zhang Xian. Zhong Shou couldn't help but laugh when he saw the situation. If it was other things, then it was okay. However, he was an expert in the illusionary sword path. Without any hesitation, he placed a corner. A white chess piece was placed beside the black chess piece. This sword is not bad, but it seems like you are sharpening your spear at the last minute. It is still lacking a little. It can't hide from me, but it isn't hard to break it. Manor Head isn't good at this path, so why do you have to force it? Most of the martial artists in the world focused on one path. How could they be like him, to allow himself to merge with the swords of hundreds of schools, as long as it was a sword technique? No matter how exquisite it was, he would study it deeply. He had studied most of the top sword techniques in the cloud world that were spread outside. He had pretty much managed to combine the strengths of hundreds of schools. This Wujua Villahead used the cloud-shocking god-destroying sword art to test him. However, he himself hadn't seen the complete cloud-shocking god-destroying sword art and didn't spend much effort to study it. Although the path of martial arts was easy to master, and Yen Fan was already at the spiritual grandmaster realm, just half a step away from the celestial martial realm, he couldn't be compared to people who cultivated every day. The martial cultivators of this era couldn't be like him, using illusionary realms to train their sword techniques day and night. To say that he was sharpening his spear at the last minute wasn't an exaggeration. As expected, out of those 8 swords, one of them suddenly shook. Then, all the swords collapsed and disappeared without a trace. Yen Fan's breathing instantly stopped. Zhong Shou's evaluation was right about him. Lei Dong, who was behind him, gave out a gloating laugh. Yen Fan's brows couldn't help but furrow, turning his head and staring coldly at his nephew. However, he didn't place down his chess piece, looking towards Taiyuan Fairy in satisfaction. He roughly knew about Zhong Shou's talent and sword path standards, so he didn't need to try anymore. As expected, his sword path was one with the spirit, using the sword rhythm level to display the true sword intent. There might not even be one in 100 years who could match up to this level of talent. Shui Lingbo wasn't courteous, similarly throwing a black chess piece into the chessboard. In Zhong Shou's mind, the situation changed once more. The countless clouds and mist gathered once again. This time, the sword attack was different from Yen Fan's. It was extremely strong and firm, sharp and overbearing. Its aura was several times stronger than the first sword. Zhong Shou's breathing couldn't help but stop. That strong sword aura had vaguely entered his mind. His gaze instantly turned sharp and swiftly dissipated. As expected, the sword is like the person. This sword attack is really overbearing. His words vaguely pierced the 2 people seated at the table. Zhong Shou's expression regained calmness. However, the essence of this cloud-shocking god-destroying sword art needs to be both firm and soft. If it is too firm, it will break easily. How is this a cloud sword? It is obviously an ice sword. The chess piece in his hand landed and there was a crisp "pa" sound, giving out a reverberating sound. That firm and strong sword instantly shattered like ice dust. That tyrannical sword momentum also disappeared without a trace. Shui Lingbo was overjoyed, and her eyes were filled with light. If it wasn't for Yen Fan, this despicable old man, being right beside her, she might not have been able to win. He really wanted to snatch Zhong Shou away and end this matter. At this moment, she could only bear with it, her brows turning solemn as she acted like she was angry from embarrassment, coldly hollering, "You are just an 8-meridian secret martial artist, and you dare to say that I am wrong." Chapter 131. You are just an 8-meridian secret martial artist, and you dare to say that I am wrong. How do you know that the essence of the cloud-shocking god-destroying sword art isn't as strong as mine? Along with Zhong Shou's words, a giant sword formed in the air. The aura it gave off was even more intense. The ice-blue sword body gave off a cold glow. Zhong Shou was speechless, dissing in his heart. How was this still the cloud-shocking god-destroying sword? It should be the mysterious ice sword, right? Seeing the sword slash over, Zhong Shou's brows rose up, laughing coldly. Talking about sword techniques is just talking. Since you said that your sword intent is the true essence of the cloud-shocking god-destroying sword art, then let me compete with you. In that case, I will compete with Fairy and see who is better between you and me. He didn't say anything, placing down another chess piece, flying into the top right corner. In front of Zhong Shou's eyes, another sword formed. However, it was controlled by his mind, like a cloud, like a mist. The light was changing, giving off an ethereal feeling. Inside, there were numerous ice grains contained within. When it moved, it gave out a rustling sound, its aura shocking. He slashed in the air, clashing with the ice sword. The cloud sword instantly collapsed, but in the blink of an eye, it formed once more. On the contrary, the mysterious giant ice sword was struck by the high-speed flowing ice grains, causing numerous holes to appear. The few important parts of the sword's spine were on the verge of collapsing. Before the sword recovered, the cloud mist giant sword slashed over with a rustling sound. After this sword clashed, the mysterious giant ice sword instantly collapsed and broke into pieces without any suspense. As for the cloud mist sword, it still hadn't stopped. After circling around, it slashed towards the other side. It was obviously a ball of mist, but its aura was shocking, like it was extremely sharp. Taiyuan Fairy Shui Lingbo's expression instantly changed. She placed down another chess piece, smacking it onto the chessboard. Only then did the mist sword totally dissipate. Then, she looked at the other side of the chessboard in disbelief. She thought that the sword clashing just now would at most be on the same level. Who knew that the outcome would be a crushing defeat? Although the second chess piece successfully dissolved Zhong Shou's attack, when this chess piece landed, she had already lost. This half-demon youth had actually grasped the essence of the cloud-shocking godly annihilating sword art. Even if he didn't have the cultivation method of this sword art, in the future when he used this cloud sword, power wouldn't be weaker than the true cloud-shocking god-destroying sword. That Yen Fan's eyes narrowed into a smile, his old face smiling like a flower. He stared at Taiyuan Fairy coldly with a hidden killing intent. He was thinking of killing her, snatching her away, and then running away. Thinking about it, he couldn't help but think. Looking at the chessboard, he suddenly had an idea. On the chessboard, he placed a chess piece. This is the end of the game. What the Crown Prince said also enlightened me. As my nephew said, the sword path is one with the spirit. However, Taiyuan Fairy and I still have some unanswered questions about the path of martial art. Can the prince help us solve it? When his words landed, Zhong Shou only felt that the world he was in changed once more. He was in a narrow cave, left and right were thick stone walls. Below was fiery red lava that could melt everything. Above was an intense wind that could rip everything to shreds. Around him were numerous souls, numerous knife lights and sword shadows, all attacking. Like they wanted to swallow him and slice him into pieces. He couldn't help but grind his teeth, knowing that this was the method of a true image realm spirit master, using soul power to draw his consciousness into this illusionary realm. It was extremely real, like he was in the real world. Chu Shui didn't know about the changes, only seeing that Yen Fan made an extra move. She couldn't help but rage. You made an extra move. How can you cheat? Yen Fan smiled and didn't speak. Shui Lingbo coldly glanced at him. However, she was also excited, waiting for Zhong Shou's reaction. Before this, it was just testing Zhong Shou's sword path talent, and it was enough to give him full marks. No, it's 200 points. Only 400 points can be evaluated. What they were testing now was Zhong Shou's heart. The martial path was like a winding path in the mountains climbing a steep mountain. The further one went, the harder it was. Above was a dangerous cliff, below was a bottomless abyss. Just like the illusionary realm that Zhong Shou was facing. She was also curious, what kind of response would this dual meridian body, barriers from heaven and sword path talent, who could be said to be unparalleled, do? It really made one look forward to it. Opposite the chessboard, Zhong Shou held onto the chess piece, sweat pouring out like a fountain, drenching his shirt. Within this cave, he was facing the vicious soul blade shadows. Zhong Shou was slightly distracted. He couldn't help but think back to his last life. The barriers from heaven that had trapped him for half his life, the revenge and killing after his martial path reached great success. The millions of sword battles in the illusionary realm, the dangerous battles he had experienced in the current world. The peak of the martial path that he couldn't reach even if he went all out as expected. If he took a wrong step, he would fall into the lava hell. Even if he went all out and climbed up, he would most probably die under the merciless might of the heavens. Just this blocking burial, such a small danger, it was enough to stop him. Stop him, the head of the 7 emperors of the cloud world, soared Emperor Tanchio? Scoffing coldly, the pride in Zhong Shou's chest rumbled. That indomitable and boundless will pierce through the sky. In this life, so what if he had dual meridian body, barriers from heaven, and his soul was broken? Zhong Shou would look down on this world and climb to the peak once more. When Zhong Shou's hand once again landed on the chessboard, he felt many obstacles. He only felt that there were many obstructions, numerous weird powers trying to stop him, trying to cause his hand to deviate to the side. However, the white chess piece at Zhong Shou's fingertips seemed to have a mind of its own, easily avoiding it. Then, he heavily smashed the chess piece into the center of the chessboard. Pa-ta, the surrounding heaven and earth spiritual energy suddenly surged. In the end, it couldn't take it anymore. The chess pieces on the chessboard all shot out and scattered in all directions. On the chessboard, only that white chess piece was left, lying quietly in the center of the 19 crisscrossing lines. It was like it was telling people that within this chessboard, only it was supreme. The bank of the small stream was silent for a moment. Not to mention the sword path, at this moment, the few people around the chessboard were shocked by the heroic spirit that exploded out from Zhong Shou. The mist seems to have thinned by a little. Tens of miles away, Li Yunyang raised her head and looked at the sky. Before this, the mist was sometimes thick and sometimes thin, making one annoyed. It was only at this moment that there seemed to be signs of it gradually dissipating. A few minutes ago, one couldn't even see their fingers. However, at this moment they could see 200 feet away. Xianyuan Iran's brows furrowed. Suddenly, he paused and looked ahead with a grave expression. Li Yunyang followed closely behind and stopped. When she saw the situation in front of her, she broke out in a cold sweat, only to see that under the rumbling mist, there was actually a hole. It was so deep that one couldn't see the bottom, like it was 100,000-foot cliff. Why is there a hole here? Luckily, Little Miss noticed quickly, otherwise I would have fallen. Xianyuan Iran kept silent and didn't speak, looking at the bottom of the hole. Li Yunyang was shocked. However, when she listened carefully, as expected, the hole was hundreds of feet deep. A teen's voice spread out, "Is there someone up there? There is someone, right? I heard your voices. I am Gantian Mountain Zhongling, the brother of the next monster king, Zhong Shi. Pull us up, as long as you can save us. My Gantian Mountain will repay you." Xianyuan Iran blinked, exchanging glances with Li Yunyang. The latter frowned, her face filled with confusion. It's him? This Zhongling has several Xiantian experts beside him, and he is also a mythic master. This hole is only 500 feet deep, so why can't we climb up after falling in? Looking down carefully, the mist had dissipated a little. However, he could vaguely see that the ground below was actually a smooth and hard stone wall. What made one's hair stand up was that the stone wall was covered in a thick layer of butter. Li Yunyang couldn't help but feel a chill down her spine. So this hole wasn't natural, but dug out by someone. Who could be so vicious? Once one fell in, how would one be able to get out? Then, she heard Zhongling scold, "Where are there so many mud eels and snakes? How disgusting! Oi, can the people above hear me? Why aren't you pulling me up?" The mist dissipated once more, and when Li Yunyang looked once more, she felt a wave of disgust in her chest. Countless earthen yellow loaches, eels, and small snakes were constantly rolling and drilling below. A few people were trapped within. Occasionally they would jump up, but without any hesitation they would slide down the stone wall. One of them had sharp eyes and saw the people above the hole, shouting loudly, "Are you the princess of Xian Mountain City, Miss Xianyuan and Miss Li Yunyang? I am Gantian Mountain's Feng Shao. My young master and the prince are cousins. Please save us for the sake of the crown prince." Xianyuan Iran laughed silently, too lazy to say anything. Looking around, she said expressionlessly, "The mist has started to dissipate, let's go back." She didn't hesitate, turning around and leaving. Zhongling below panicked, scolding out, "You dare not save me? When my brother becomes the monster king of Gantian Mountain, he will wipe out your entire Xian Mountain city. If it wasn't for our Gantian Mountain protecting you, your Xian Mountain city would have been wiped out. Do you think that trash of a fiancé can protect you? Sooner or later, my brother will kill him. Brat, if you don't save me today, I will make you my concubine and torture you day and night." Xianyuan Iren originally didn't care, but when she heard the last part, her brows furrowed. She walked back the way she came. Just as Zhongling was delighted and Li Yunyang was shocked. Xianyuan Iren directly took out some powder and sprinkled it down. She then clapped her hands and turned around to leave. Li Yunyang found it weird, hurriedly following, asking curiously, "Little miss, what was that powder?" Xianyuan Iren smiled when she heard that, calmly shaking her head, "Nothing, just some fire scale powder that will make those eels dig holes." Li Yunyang was startled, feeling goosebumps all over her body. So her little miss had such a sinister and vicious side. At this moment, within the hole, Zhongling was crazily scolding out, "Who the hell dug this hole? So sinister, when I get out, I will make sure he dies without a burial place. Damn it! Why does this eel know how to dig holes? If you like this work, you are welcome to come to Chidian. Come to vote for me." Chapter 132. At the side of the stream, Lei Dong sneezed heavily, not stopping at all. He touched his nose with his hand, thinking to himself, "Who the hell is talking about me?" His expression suddenly changed. The stiff and cold atmosphere here seemed to have been totally ignited by his sneeze. Countless amounts of supreme force began to silently collide with each other. Two powerful and vast martial Dao wills were also fighting fiercely in the small space. The situation in front of him seemed normal, but one could see that the dirt and sand that Yen Fan and Taiyuan Ferry were sitting on were slowly disappearing at a visible rate. They turned into even smaller dust particles and scattered. Those green weeds had no life force at all. They were only being maintained by two unreasonable powers, which was why they didn't dissipate with the wind. Yen Fan looked at Taiyuan Ferry with a fake smile, a cold intent flashing across. He turned around and looked kindly at Zhong Shou. "Does the prince have a master? Are you willing to join my Wujua villa? You and Lei Dong are sworn brothers and learn from the same sect. You have company. My Wujua villa has 5 ultimate techniques for you to choose from. 30 years later, I will give up my position and let you take charge of Wujua villa." His withered hands couldn't help but clench tightly. It wasn't that sword path talent, but the confidence and tenacity of this teen to be able to cut through all dangers. Such a person, even if his talent was average, with barriers from heaven, he would definitely have some achievements. He definitely wouldn't allow this kid to miss out. Samuraim's eyes lit up. He had heard of the Wujua Villa's Wujua Villa for a long time. However, in his last life, he was only fated to meet them. The foundations of this 5th shrine sect were far better than that of Lingyun's sect. The number of books in the book vault was something that Lingyun's sect couldn't compare to. Taiyuan Fairy Shui Lingbo laughed coldly. "Your Wujua villa is just the 5th shrine sect. You actually have the face to snatch a disciple in front of me? Little kid, although my Taiyuan sect is 3rd, we control 3rd and 7th shrines at the same time. There are very few people in the world who can suppress my sect. If you are willing to join my sect, you can directly become the direct disciple of the sect leader and learn my sect's luminous spiritual energy sword. With your talent in Sword Dao, you'll reach the Empyrean realm in at most 5 years." Samuraim's light immediately brightened. If it was the luminous spiritual sword, it would be pretty good. That was an extreme art that was even more powerful than the cloud-shocking deity-destroying sword. It could directly lead to the immortal martial Great Dao, extremely extraordinary. Yen Fan didn't get angry at all, still smiling, Fairy's words are wrong. Although Taiyuan sect is stronger than my sect by a knot. However, what did this have to do with the strength of one's faction? What was the most suitable? Out of my disciples, there are already 2 who have reached the 4 Meridian Grandmaster realm. The other 3 are ascended Grandmasters. In this cloud world, no one can beat me, Yen Fan, when it comes to nurturing disciples. How many disciples does Taiyuan Fairy have now? What achievements have you made? Puchi. When Shui Lingbo heard this, she suddenly laughed and said in a mocking tone, Senior Martial Brother Yen, could it be that you've misunderstood something about this little sister? Shui Lingbo did not dare to take in such a peerless talent to train. She also knew that she did not have the qualifications to do so. Naturally, I would bring him under my senior martial brother. He would be the one to teach him. Although my senior martial brother is not in this world, if he knew that there was such a talent, he would happily return. The direct disciple of the sect leader, how is that just for words? Yen Fan was startled. Then, he broke out into a laugh. I, Yen Fan, thought wrongly. As expected, such a talent is not someone I can teach. However, if your Taiyuan sect has celestial martial experts, does my Wujua villa not have any? Coincidentally, my senior martial uncle has been complaining that in a few hundred years, he wasn't able to find a disciple that he liked. Even if my senior martial uncle can't do it, I can ask the vast habitat master to personally teach the prince. Who knows if your senior Tsang Xingdao has that patience? When Lei Dong heard that, his brows furrowed. He was thinking that if Zhong Shou became the disciple of that senior martial uncle, wouldn't he have to call him senior martial uncle? If he became the disciple of the vast habitat master, then he would have to call him senior martial uncle. How could that be? Chu Shui's throat was a little dry. Listening to the tone of the 2 of them, they seemed to be the top experts in the world. Before this, when Zhong Shou rejected Lingyun's sect, she only felt regret. At this moment, she felt really fortunate. Taiyuan's sect was 3rd in the shrines and Wujua Villa was 5th. Weren't they much stronger than Lingyun's sect? Such a peerless figure, one of the most tyrannical forces in the world, was actually fighting to take his young master as his disciple. Master was indeed the best. He was also a little worried about the 2 of them. Did they know about the hidden problems on her young master, and would they be like Long Ruo and just leave after dealing with it? Lien Fan's body shuddered. That day when he left Cloud Saint City with a feeling of being abandoned, how would he have thought that he would have the fate to see such a scene? That peerless expert of the cloud world was quarreling like a commoner, all for the sake of bringing this prince under his wing. Even if he was just a small coachman, he was also proud of it. Shui Lingbo scoffed and stopped arguing with Yen Fan. She turned around and looked at Zhong Shou. Little fellow, you choose yourself. Is it me or him? I, Shui Lingbo, came from so far away to take you in, don't disappoint me. Killing intent seeped out, filled with a threatening intent, like she was saying that if he didn't join her, then she would directly attack him. Yen Fan's eyes shone brightly as he smiled. Prince, you have to think carefully. Although Taiyuan sect is not bad, their techniques are world-shocking, but they are recognized as a demon sect. My Wujua Villa is a righteous sect. In just 30 years, my Wujua Villa will be under your control. With me here, you don't have to fear her. His words didn't bother about his demeanor, trying his best to seduce and slander him. He was just short of going into battle with Shui Lingbo. Shui Lingbo giggled and laughed, little fellow, although my Taiyuan sect can't guarantee that you will be in charge of the sect in 30 years, there are 7,000 of us. However, there are 7,000 female disciples in my sect, and nearly half of them are beautiful. 2 of the 10 beauties of the cloud world are from my sect. That 7 Spirit sect is a subsidiary of my sect, and also has many beauties. My sect is good at dual cultivation and energy cultivation techniques, don't have as many taboos as those righteous sections. You can pick any of the girls in the sect. You can have 3 wives and 4 concubines as you wish. If you are willing, my junior niece Yanran can immediately give her to you. Zhao Yanran was expressionless. When she heard that, she didn't feel annoyed. Instead, she looked carefully at Zhong Shou like she was really interested. Zhong Shou's brows rose up when he heard that. Actually, whether or not it was a demon sect, he didn't really care. Wasn't this 3 wives and 4 concubines his dream when he was young in his last life? Did the heavens bless him such that his dream had to be fulfilled 10,000 years ago in this era? He didn't hope for all of them to be as beautiful as Zhao Yanran. To be half as beautiful as her was already a blessing. Naturally, it was impossible for this crazy woman to be as beautiful as her. Even if she gave it to him, he wouldn't want it. Thousands of thoughts flashed through his mind, like numerous extremely beautiful women were begging for his love. Their breasts rippled, many pairs of white thighs swaying in front of him. Damn it! If he didn't have some fun in such a beautiful scene, wouldn't he be worse than a beast? Then, he came back to his senses. How could he forget that cold and lonely person on the peak of Xing Mountain? And that girl who was searching for a way out in the fog. This Taiyuan fairy's voice had a demonic nature and he nearly fell for it. His mind instinctively flashed across that extremely beautiful body. Zhong Shou wiped away the traces of saliva at the corner of his lips. Righteously, he shook his head firmly. Fairy, don't mention that again. Although 3 wives and 4 concubines isn't bad. But I, Zhong Shou, seek the pinnacle of the sword path. How can I be charmed by a woman? Not only was Yan Fan surprised, but even Shui Lingbo, the person who started it all, was slightly shocked. She expected that Zhong Shou wouldn't be charmed by her voice and definitely wouldn't be charmed by a woman. However, she didn't expect that with his 8-meridian mythic master cultivation, he would be able to break free from her Taiyuan exquisite voice so quickly. The shore of the small stream regained its silence. However, under this silence, there was a killing intent that even Chu Shui and Lian Fan could feel. Being forced back hundreds of feet, they still felt that they couldn't hold on. Zhong Shou was hesitating. It was obvious that Taiyuan sex conditions were better. Taiyuan's spiritual energy sword cultivation to the extreme could break open the celestial gate. There were also many female disciples. Even if he couldn't fight them, looking at them from afar was pleasing to the eye. He loved to talk to girls about life and dreams. This Wujua villa was not bad. He wasn't interested in taking charge of the villa, but he was really sincere. A righteous sect would undoubtedly have a brighter future. In the last life, he had been cultivating alone. Only when his sword skills reached the small success stage and he entered the ascended realm did he realize that climbing the martial path wasn't so simple. Especially when he wanted to merge the sword skills of hundreds of schools, he needed a lot of martial path accumulations. Only those sects with 10,000 years of legacies had enough foundations to satisfy him. However, at that time, he was already famous in the cloud world. In real life, he was the death-announcing sword. In the God Emperor game, he was the Sword Emperor Tanqiu. All of them were famous. 10 shrines, 19 spiritual houses, none of them dared to take him in. If he didn't know the difficulties of being a factionless cultivator, he wouldn't have taken the risk to teach Lei Dong. Which was why he was so interested in the books of the Lingyun sect. Now that he had the chance to join a large sect, he couldn't miss it. He didn't hesitate for too long. Looking at Taiyuan Fairy and Yan Fan, their gazes burning like they wanted to tear him in half, Zhong Shou had an idea. He decided to kick the ball back to them. Disciple doesn't know how to choose. Why don't the 2 seniors decide? Which sect do you think I should join? I will join that sect. How about that? Zhong Shou won't hesitate. That Yan Fan was startled, following which he laughed involuntarily. You little fellow, you are really cunning. To be continued. Chapter 133. You little fellow, you are really cunning. Yan Fan praised before not looking at Zhong Shou anymore. His hands were placed flat in front of his knees, looking really relaxed. In Zhong Shou's eyes, he was like a taut bowstring, storing up strength and waiting. Taiyuan fairy, why not give me a favor? If you are willing to give me face, my Wujue villa will have treasures to compensate you for the pain of giving up your treasures. Shui Lingbo laughed coldly, lightning flashing between her brows. Why isn't the person giving up his treasures Villa Head Yen? If you give this fellow to me, my Taiyuan sect will open up the treasury for you to take 3 treasures. I won't go back on my words. Yen Fan's brows furrowed, shaking his head. I can't. Your Highness is the only person in these thousands of years who can merge the 5 pinnacle techniques of our Wujue villa into one. Fairy, please be magnanimous. I should be the one asking Villa Head to show mercy. Shui Lingbo said coldly. This fellow's sword path talent is the only person who can learn our sect's luminous spiritual energy sword. If I raise my hand, I won't have the face to see my Tsang Xingdao ancestors. I can't let you. One can't. Do we really have to fight? Yen Fan sighed. Fairy is so young, not even 30, and you have already broken through the 9-meridian heaven chakra. Your spiritual cultivation has also reached the body-forming realm. Although it is because of the martial Saint Golden Pellet, your talent is the top in the cloud world in the past 10,000 years. However, I haven't been stupid these few hundred years. I am confident that my current cultivation is several times stronger than you. Shui Lingbo's brows rose up coldly, her chin slightly raised, not showing any fear. Let's fight. Anyways, I am not afraid, even if this Donglin cloud continent is filled with people dying and dying. This is the territory of Lingyun sect. No matter how many people die, it has nothing to do with you and me. Yen Fan laughed bitterly when he heard that. What a vicious heart you have. It really is the methods of the demon sect. Are you not afraid that the righteous Tao sects will surround and kill us again after 8,000 years? What do I, Tsang Xingdao, have to fear? 8,000 years ago, you couldn't do anything to Tsang Xingdao. 8,000 years later, you can only return empty-handed. If the great senior were to learn of what happened today, he would definitely praise our sect. Shui Lingbo suddenly stood up, surrounded by flames. This person, my Taiyuan sect must have him. Zhong Shou sat on one side of the chessboard, his face full of cold sweat. He only felt that the atmosphere was getting colder and colder. The wind and waves around were hidden, and the energy was surging. The battle intent and murderous intent on their bodies grew stronger and stronger. Chu Shui and Lien Fan could avoid it, but he was sitting between the two of them. It could be said that a slight move on one part would affect the whole situation. The slightest movement could lead to unexpected consequences. Using all his strength to barely hold on in this stormy wave-like battle of intents? He thought to himself that this was like the fish in the moat being caught in a fire at the city gate. Who knew that he would become someone who was being snatched by others? Yen Fan kept silent for a moment. Although he didn't stand up, a deep sword intent surged out from his body. His expression was calm. Although I can't bear to see people die, but today, even if this 1,000-mile area turns to dust, I won't allow this kid to fall into the hands of Tsang Xingdao. He turned around and smiled warmly at Zhong Shou. If the prince is impatient, you can leave first. It is best if you leave this place quickly. Once the fairy and I have a result, I will naturally come to find you. Zhong Shou felt like he had been pardoned and knew that this place was dangerous. He didn't dare to stay any longer, bowing towards the two of them. He brought Chu Shui and Lien Fan and hurriedly left. Before he left, he didn't forget to stretch out his palms, his 10 fingers waving towards Yen Fan behind him. Lei Dong was furious. His heart hurt so much that it felt like it was dripping blood. He thought to himself, why did I invite Uncle over? In the end, not only did he have to pay 10 bottles of celestial wine, but he also lost that stone. It was a double loss. Thinking about the stone, Lei Dong couldn't help but stare furiously at the despicable woman opposite him. His eyes opened wide, sending out electric waves. "Return that stone to me." Zhao Yinran was too lazy to bother, her gaze looking to the side. Lei Dong didn't give up, still staring, scoffing coldly. "If you don't return it, then don't blame me for speaking out of turn. If that old witch finds out that you were the one who let me go, the one who led this old man here, do you know the consequences?" Zhao Yinran's gaze sharpened, staring back at him. She also used her gaze to tell him, "If you have the balls, why don't you try?" Lei Dong's aura weakened. He was worried that this crazy woman would destroy the stone. Thinking about it carefully, he decided to temporarily bear with it and not lower himself to her level. Just as the two of them stared at one another in rage, the situation on the side of Yen Fan and Taiyuan Fairy changed. Yen Fan suddenly smiled and retracted his killing intent. He sat down calmly. "Fairy, are you so sure that this kid is the future godly emperor candidate of the Cloud World, as mentioned in the prophecy of the three saints?" The flames around Shui Lingbo suddenly dimmed, her expression still filled with coldness. "Whether or not it is him, I don't know. I only know that in the future, even if he isn't a candidate, his achievements might not be below those of those geniuses." Indeed, great minds think alike. I think so too. However, this Zong Shou is only one person and can't be split into two. For this kid, do we really have to have another huge war involving the various sects? Seeing that Shui Lingbo's expression was cold, she wasn't moved at all. Yen Fan's gaze slowly turned solemn. "Then why don't we make a bet? Let's decide who this kid belongs to." Shui Lingbo's brows furrowed with interest. "That's what I want. What do you want to bet?" When Zong Shou rode the lightning traveling spirit bone back to where he came from, he saw that the mist was still thick, but he was able to recognize the direction. Those Windrider foals were still there and none of them had escaped. The two cloud-crossing carriages were still quietly parked there. However, Xianyuan Iran and Li Yunyang still hadn't returned. Just as the three of them stepped onto the carriage, then he saw two graceful figures running towards him one after the other. Zong Shou didn't need to look and knew that it was Xianyuan Iran and Li Yunyang. When the two of them got close, Zong Shou looked carefully at Xianyuan Iran. Seeing that she was totally clean, it was obvious that she hadn't faced any danger. Only then did he relax. He smiled. "Did you find the senior who cast the fog spell?" Xianyuan Iran shook her head. She could feel the teasing intent in Zong Shou's words and stared over viciously. However, after exchanging glances, for some reason, her face flushed red and she looked away. When Li Yunyang heard that, her brows furrowed and she was a little annoyed. "We didn't find that senior and instead saw a piece of trash. How disgusting. However, that fellow probably isn't having a good time. He must be in so much pain that he wants to die." As she said the last few words, Li Yunyang couldn't help but smile, gloating. "However, the person who dug the hole is really vicious. 600 feet stone hole is okay, but he actually covered it with butter. Once you fall in, you definitely won't be able to climb out. It was most probably done by the person who cast the fog. Luckily, Little Miss was alert, otherwise you would have fallen in." "Trash? 600 feet stone hole butter? What the heck?" Zong Shou was totally confused. After shaking his head slightly, he signaled Lien Fan to drive the carriage forward. Who knows, in the next moment there might be a shocking battle. When the two strongest people below the celestial realm fought, once they went all out. Thousands of miles of land, tens of millions of lives, in just a breath, they could be turned to dust. Since Yen Fan had already warned them, naturally it was best to leave this place as soon as possible. Li Yunyang was startled. Compared to the person in front of her, wasn't Zongling like trash? Who would know that this Gantian mountain prince was a piece of trash, who had no hope of cultivating? Actually, he could kill deceitful sword Rin Qianqiu, mist sword Xiejun, and rage sword Yun Tao in just a dozen breaths. The person who cut off the head of 100,000 blood killer Li Yaling? That out-of-body realm cultivation was real. Ain's soul could move freely even when the sun rose, making it hard for one to see what was real and what was fake. Or was he already at the night-wandering realm? Speaking of which, even her little miss was kept in the dark. Li Yunyang couldn't help but look to her side. Who knows if Xianyuan Iren would blame her when she found out in the future? If she really blamed her, she would admit it. After all, only Shenxiao's sect had the mysterious chill ancient pill. Who knows when the person she informed would send someone to find it? Not long after the two carriages left the foggy land, the two carriages left. In a giant stone hole not far away, Zongling's face was green, her body covered in oil as she climbed out from the side with much difficulty. Just as she stabilized herself, her butt tightened as she used her true qi. Instantly, tens of living creatures were forced out from behind her. Zongling grabbed them with one hand, clenching her fist. Instantly blood and meat flew everywhere. His face, which was originally as handsome as jade, was now completely pale and emitting a murderous aura. I swear I will take revenge for today. Xianyuan Iren and that Zong Shou. If it wasn't for Xianyuan Iren not saving him, he would have escaped. If it wasn't for him tracking Zong Shou, why would he be tortured like that? Naturally, there was also that damn powder. He didn't know the background of the person who summoned the fog and dug the hole, so he probably couldn't do anything to him. This was why he hated these two people to the bone. That Feng Xiao also climbed out, his face was also extremely ugly. Her butt tightened as she pulled out a loach from her ear. She walked up and said, "Young master, the fog here has dissipated. We should set off as soon as possible and chase up. If we are left behind, we won't be able to answer to young master Zongshi." Zongling snorted, a look of dissatisfaction on his face. What's there to chase? Since that person had a 7-meridian Xuanwu ancestor protecting him in the dark, then why did he have to be so arrogant? Why would he need us to attack? Young master is wrong. It is because of that Xuanwu ancestor that we need to follow. Feng Zhao's expression was solemn. This person is heavily injured and is at his weakest. If young master Zongshi wants to smoothly control Gantian Mountain, we have to get rid of him. Zongling's brows furrowed and she was in deep thought. Just as her expression slowly relaxed, she heard a loud explosion tens of miles away. A bright light exploded out, and a large amount of smoke rose up. The wind was vast and strong, sweeping across the area. It broke all the trees in the surroundings. Zongling's heart skipped a beat, and without hesitation, he turned around and jumped back into the pit filled with snakes and eels. To be continued. Chapter 134. That rumbling sound was deafening even from tens of miles away. Tens of Windrider foals all cried out in shock. Without needing Lien Fan to rush them, they crazily galloped forwards. Zong Shou stuck his head out of the window, speechless at the scenes behind him. That Yen Fan and Shui Lingbo had both retracted their strength, and had their own worries. However, just this strike alone was enough to make everything within a radius of tens of miles desolate. The cultivators of this era really didn't have anything to worry about. If it was 10,000 years later, no matter how noble one's identity was, if one dared to attack above the cloud continent, exceeding the strength of the ascended realm, the various sects and factions would work together to kill them. Even if they had grievances, they would have to settle it within the Cloud Ocean. He himself was a frequent guest of the Cloud Ocean battle. That Yen Fan's hundreds of years of martial path and spiritual cultivation accumulation is really extraordinary. However, due to the restrictions of the world's spirit energy, even with the help of shrines, he was unable to enter the celestial realm. After the spiritual energy wave, he instantly soared into the sky. However, that Shui Lingbo isn't weak either. It was said that when she was young, she obtained a desolate era martial saint golden pellet that sealed her cultivation. Her true qi and soul power are the best in the world. 10 years later, she also rose up. If the two of them went all out, it would be tough to determine a victor. Shaking his head, Zhongsho kept his thoughts and retracted his head. He felt a little regretful. If the two of them couldn't win, his dream of joining a large sect and reading the ocean amounts of martial path books would be temporarily lost. Following which, he looked forward to the 10 bottles of celestial wine that Lei Dong promised. Top-grade celestial wine, its effects could be compared to pills. The effects were quick and the fire poison and poison were little. To a certain extent, it was even harder to obtain than those pills. Xianyuan Iren and Li Yunyang were shocked. They didn't think too deeply about it, only thinking that there were top experts fighting here. They also didn't dare to stay here for long, Li Yunyang driving the Windrider foals to follow closely. The rest of the journey was uneventful. Perhaps because she was verifying the chill spirit profound sense pill, Xianyuan Iren once again hid in the carriage. It was rare to see her come out a few times in a day. Occasionally, they would leave in a hurry. Usually, they would rush back after 2 hours or half a day to catch up to the carriage. Who knew if they had gone to pick the ice bluegrass or snow stem seed? He had seen Xianyuan Iren's small Qiankuan bag before. There were countless herbs in it, all of them were categorized into different categories. There were all kinds of spiritual herbs below level 3. The ingredients needed for the chilling spirit profound sense pill were almost all complete. Only the ice bluegrass and the snow stem seed were missing. Zhongsho heaved a sigh of relief. At least for the time being, he didn't have to be interrogated by her about when they should get married. Chu Shui was still on top of the carriage, catching birds. After the battle with the spirit master that day, the girl seemed to have understood something and stopped complaining. Not only did they catch all kinds of birds and beasts, they even took the initiative to increase the number to 200. It was even more difficult when the carriage was moving at high speed. Chu Shui didn't complain anymore and didn't slack off. However, from day to night, the roof of the carriage was filled with chatter, bustling with noise. Luckily, with Zhongsho's heart realm, even in a bustling city, he was unaffected and calm. No matter how noisy it was, it wouldn't affect his cultivation. Every day he felt really happy. Chu Shui probably didn't notice it herself. However, every day, he could feel that Chu Shui's speed was crazily increasing. This process didn't happen all of a sudden, but under the effects of the 2 human pinnacle pills, she improved little by little each day, accumulating until she broke through the shackles. Pretty much silently, she crossed the threshold of the 9 meridians of the bodily chakra realm and stepped towards the peak of the bodily chakra realm. However, he still felt some regret in his heart. Chu Shui's martial path was getting stronger and stronger by the day. In terms of spiritual cultivation, she was falling behind. Although this bird-catching technique could increase Chu Shui's intuition and speed, in terms of strength, it didn't help at all. He could only think of a way after she settled down. However, looking at the situation, she probably didn't need the 3 months that he had predicted. At most, in a few days, she would be able to enter the Xiantian realm. This brat really did have the combat martial body. At this moment, Li Yunyang, who was on the horse at the back, had a different feeling. Before this, she was filled with disdain towards Chu Shui catching birds every day. However, after that day she started to pay attention to it. Every time she saw Chu Shui's flying movements, she was shocked. Simple and efficient, and each time she attacked, it was extremely accurate. It was like she predicted that those birds wouldn't be able to escape from her control. Each action was extremely beautiful and tugging at one's heartstrings. It had a spiritual aura like that of a goddess, but also like that of an elegant and nimble snow cat. A few days later, Li Yunyang had some comprehension. She knew that Chu Shui had unknowingly comprehended a spiritual, simple, and unrestrained martial rhythm that wasn't restricted by the martial path of the world. It was like in just a few days she had reached an extremely high level. It made her feel deep and indiscernible, and her entire body felt cold. All of a sudden, She wasn't sure what her chances of winning were against this little girl, who was only at the peak of the bodily chakra realm. West of the Sudian mountain range was a desolate land filled with beasts. Only after they had traveled a few thousand miles did they finally see dense amounts of people. Following which, they traveled for over 10 days before they got close to the center of Donglin Cloud Continent. This place was filled with plains and rivers. It was supposed to be the most fertile and prosperous place. However, because it was a place where 4 battles took place, it was extremely desolate. The moment they entered this region, Li Yunyang's face slowly turned ugly. It wasn't because of Chu Shui's cultivation speed, but because beside the road, there were many people in tattered clothes. They were all yellow and emaciated, on the verge of collapsing. Their faces were ashen white like they were dead. The moment they saw the carriage speeding over, they crazily surrounded it. Luckily, these 2 carriages were traveling in the air. Lian Fan and Li Yunyang's driving skills were also really good, and they were able to easily avoid them. Xianyuan Iran spent every day in the carriage refining pills and didn't care about outside matters. In his last life, Zhong Shou was basically a shut-in. At this moment, he was also going all out to perfect his world-shocking spiritual art. At least the entire set of energy cultivation techniques needed to be completed before he reached Xiantian. Apart from that, there was also the cultivation of soul power. Although his soul was pure, he could travel at night. He could even directly skip the night wandering realm and enter the return to sun realm. However, within his soul ocean, he still needed to form 3 true spiritual talismans. Martial cultivators were split into heaven, earth, and body. Martial warriors, martial masters, and mythic masters were body chakra realm experts. They could be split into strong and weak based on 1 meridian to 9 meridians. Xiantian masters, martial ancestors, and Xuanwu ancestors were earth chakra realm experts. At this realm, they could have a place in Donglin Cloud Continent. Above the 6 meridians of the earth chakra realm, one could be a hero. Ascended ancestors, grandmasters, and spiritual grandmasters were heaven meridians experts. Above the ascended realm, one couldn't participate in mortal battles. When one reached the 4 meridians of the heaven chakra realm, due to the weak spiritual energy in heaven and earth, most of the time one needed to hide in shrines and spiritual houses with dense spiritual energy to prevent their cultivation from decreasing and their lifespan from decreasing. People like Yen Fan and Taiyuan Fairy spent most of their time in secluded meditation and were hard to see. Spiritual cultivators and spiritual cultivators were different. Actually, before the out-of-body realm, there wasn't an accurate division of realms. Focusing, soul-observing, and spirit-nurturing were just the rough terms. Just like Zhong Shou, a few months ago, he couldn't accurately classify realms. Only after the out-of-body realm did one have an accurate way to judge realms, which was the formation of talismans. Within the soul ocean, any spirit master who didn't form 3 true spiritual talismans was at the out-of-body realm. Beyond that, one was a night-wandering realm spirit master. Above 6 could be considered return to sun realm. Pretty much every true spiritual talisman formed could increase one's soul power by a large amount, allowing one to grasp more technique. After 9, one could be considered the peak of the return to sun realm. After 9, one could still form more. There was no limit to the number, all of which could increase one's soul power. However, only after breaking through to the day-wandering realm could one have a qualitative breakthrough. Day-wandering, body-shaping, and true image realms could also use 3, 6, and 9 to determine one's strength. However, at this time, it was God Talisman spiritual seeds. As for the immortal martial godmasters, they were more or less the same. This was why even if Zhong Shou's soul was pure and his soul power was strong, it was several times stronger than that of an aperture realm spirit master. As long as the 3 true spiritual talismans in his soul ocean weren't fully formed, he couldn't be considered night-wandering realm. Today, He had deduced the world-shocking spiritual art of his 8th meridian and was close to perfection. Zhong Shou couldn't help but feel delighted. Chu Shui suddenly hung upside down on the roof of the carriage, her head hanging beside the window. Her eyes shone like stars, her eyes were wet like a newborn deer. Just as Zhong Shou thought that she wanted to slack off, Chu Shui stuttered, "Young master, can you lend me some money?" Zhong Shou was stunned. "Borrow money? Why do you want to borrow money for?" he asked curiously. "Didn't you pick up a lot in Xiaoyuan City? Why do you need to borrow money from me?" Chu Shui immediately rubbed her fingers together and smiled awkwardly. "That money was all dropped by other people, and I couldn't find anyone to return it to, so I gave it to the beggars in Xiaoyuan City. They are so pitiful. Some of it was given to the medical hall. I only have a little left." Zhong Shoxin was enlightened. No wonder that day when he was fixing the carriage, Chu Shui was nowhere to be seen. Suddenly, he had an idea. Zhong Shou went through the window and arrived at the roof of the carriage. Looking around, he saw countless figures with disheveled faces. They were either in groups of 3 or 5 or in swarms. They followed the winding dirt road here, weakly heading towards the west. Zhong Shou's brows furrowed, his eyes revealing a serious expression. "Lian Fan, do you know what is going on?" Looking at the withered trees and dried-up land, it seemed like it was in the middle of a drought. However, he remembered that a few hundred years before and after the spiritual wave, the growth of trees and plants was especially crazy. Even in the desert, if one took care of it well, one could grow a flower. Food was not a problem. Even if it was a drought, it wouldn't starve people to the point of leaving their homes. When Lian Fan heard this, he frowned. He helplessly restrained the windrider foal and stopped the carriage. Chapter 135. Slightly hesitating, Lian Fan hesitantly opened his mouth. "I have heard about this matter when I was in Cloud Saint City. Has young master heard about Lianhai City and Fenghua City?" Zhong Shou thought about it carefully. The other Zhong Shou was a person who didn't know about the world, and in his 13 years of memories, he definitely didn't have such information. What he could rely on was the huge amount of books he had read in his last life. Only after a short while did he finally find the information. They were all average-sized cities, a few grades lower than Cloud Saint City. However, they each ruled close to 1,000 miles of land, each had a population of 3.5 million and could be considered a country. Although they had a large population, they were different from the monster race. Everyone in the monster race practiced martial arts, relying on their talents, and pretty much all had decent skills. Gantian Mountain had 4 million people under them. Apart from the women, the elderly, and the young, at least 1 million could wear armor. Amongst which, there were 1 million grade 3 martial artists, 100,000 martial masters, and 3,000 mythic masters. Apart from that, there were many subordinate cities, and they could casually gather millions of troops. This was why when they were at their peak they could control 7 provinces. Even if their strength had shrunk, they still controlled 4 provinces, and their territory was stable. They were truly the top power in the west of Donglin Cloud Continent. Based on Zhong Shou's own guesses, the reason why Zhong Weiran wasn't able to unify Donglin was because he was obstructed by the sects of Cloud Continent and could only hide in a corner. Cities like Lianhai City and Fenghua City, although they had 3.5 million people, less than 200,000 could be pulled onto the battlefield. Less than 3% of the elites could be compared to the Gantian Mountain monster race soldiers. At most, there were 100 mythic masters. However, amongst the human race cities, this strength was considered not bad. However, in his memory, these 2 cities had already collapsed when the spirit tide had appeared. Lian Fan opened his mouth and didn't worry anymore. Cloud Saint City's news is really fast, which is why I heard of some things. Lianhai City and Fenghua City were fighting over a spirit stone mine. They had been fighting non-stop and had already fought more than 10 battles. I heard that the surrounding cities have also interfered, sending troops and generals. 2 months ago, both sides used close to 500,000 troops. This was most likely the reason why these disaster victims were fleeing. Wherever the army passed, not even a blade of grass would survive. It was already a drought, so even if there were any food reserves, they would be completely wiped out. I heard that 100,000 people have starved to death. Zhong Shou raised his eyebrows as his heart stirred. Spirit stones? This was something even rarer than beast crystals. At the same time, it could be used to create talisman weapons and spirit weapons, to refine pills, to cast spells, or to replenish vital energy. Similarly, it could be absorbed directly to raise one's cultivation. However, because it was purer and had fewer hidden dangers, it was viewed as a treasure by all high-level martial cultivators and spirit masters. However, due to the scarcity of spirit stones, even the Holy Lands and spiritual mansion sects coveted them. This battle of nearly 1 million people was mostly supported by these sects and forces in order to fight for this spirit stone mine. It was just that the people who lived here often suffered. He had forgotten that this was a chaotic era where the strong preyed on the weak. It was a chaotic era where people were eaten without spitting out their bones. His expression was indifferent as he glanced at the people in dirty clothes on the street. Their eyes were soulless and filled with despair. Most of them brought their kids and were shaking like they were about to fall down at any moment. When these people saw the 2 carriages, they seemed to see some hope. However, when they saw the carriage and the wildebeests floating in the air 40 feet above the ground, they continued forward in disappointment. Zhong Shou thought about it seriously before taking out a bag from his body. He took out a portion and casually tossed it to Lian Fan. "Help me pass these few hundred beast crystals to the 2 city lords. I don't care how they use it, but at least give these people a way out. In a place of calamity, grain would definitely be extremely expensive." Although the few hundred grade 3 beast crystals in his bag was a huge fortune, it was still not enough. However, along with the few grade 5 and 10s of grade 4 beast crystals that Cloud Saint City Lord Su Jingyuan gave him, it was barely enough. Unfortunately, this place was secluded and probably didn't have a branch of the Sanlu Bank. He had a huge fortune, but he was unable to use it. In Donglin Cloud Continent, 50 silver was enough for a commoner to use for a month. 1 grade 4 beast crystal was equivalent to 100 grade 3 beast crystals worth 100,000 silver. This was why when Zhong Shou shouted out 10,000 grade 3 beast crystals in Cloud Saint City, Zhongling scolded him for being a wastrel. In this era there were simply too few beast crystals. The ratio of beast crystals obtained from hunting beasts was less than 1 in 10. Moreover, there were many cultivators who needed these crystals. This was why the essence stones were sold at such a high price. Calculating carefully, there was only 1 Xiantian in 1 million people in the cloud world. A Xiantian expert would go through hardships and go all out to hunt, not caring about cultivation. After a year of hard work, he could only obtain less than 10 grade 4 beast crystals. Naturally, one could imagine its value. In that bag, there were a total of 60 grade 4 beast crystals. Even when grain prices were exploding, it was more than enough to feed 1 million people for a year. Zhong Shou also predicted that the city lords of Lianhai City and Fenghua City wouldn't use it to help the calamity. Most of the beast crystals would be stolen. However, as long as the 2 of them weren't willing to let all their people die, they would leak some out. Just a little would be enough for these people to live. When Lian Fan took the bag, he was startled. He didn't understand and looked at Zhong Shou in disbelief. Following which, he didn't say a word, immediately riding a windrider foal and swiftly leaving. At this moment, Li Yunyang chased up with the carriage and stopped at the side. When he heard this, he subconsciously sneered. "I didn't expect your highness to be so kind. However, your beast crystals were accumulated by millions of people in Gantian Mountain. These people aren't your people and aren't of the monster race. You used them to do good, But did you consider the well-being of the millions of monster race people in Gantian Mountain? When Chu Shui heard that, she was instantly furious. They are about to starve to death. Are we just going to ignore them? Li Yunyang, do you have a conscience? Li Yunyang burst out laughing, filled with disdain. These people lost their homes because their city lords are useless. You are the prince of Gantian Mountain, so you shouldn't care about them and let them live or die. It is better for useless people to die, so that we don't waste food. The Cloud Continent has been fighting for many years and numerous people have died. Can the prince manage them all with just one person's strength? Even if we send those beast crystals over, most of them will be stolen. Why not buy the grain and distribute it yourself? When Chu Shui heard that, she was furious. However, towards the end, she was tempted and felt that it made sense. She turned around and asked for help. Zhong Shou found it amusing, expressionlessly sweeping Li Yunyang, but he didn't say anything. In the end, she was just a woman. If he really bought the grain, in the eyes of those two dumb city lords, it would be like buying people's hearts. What would they be planning? Even the secluded sects hiding behind the two of them would be on their guard. Most importantly, he didn't have the time or the leisure to do so at this moment. He wouldn't be so dumb to sacrifice his own life for others. However, Li Yunyang's words were right and made a lot of sense. However, Zhong Shou's soul came from 10,000 years in the future. How could that peaceful world not be affected at all? In his last life, he had killed many people. Cultivating the Styx River Death Sword made him look down on life and death. He didn't care about human life, be it his own or others. This was why he was always wary. If a person didn't have any compassion, how different would he be from a crazy beast? In his memory, the wealth that Zhong Weiran left him didn't have much to do with Gantian Mountain's income. Even Yin Yang said the same thing, which was why he could naturally spend the money as he wished. When Zhong Shou did things, he had his own bottom line and followed his heart. Why would he need others to interfere? However, everyone had their own thoughts and views. He wasn't willing to comment on whether Li Yunyang's words were right or wrong. He also didn't think that he was wrong. Patting Chu Shui's head, Zhong Shou looked expressionlessly into the distance, suddenly laughing. Dumb brat! Why don't I care about the lives and deaths of these people? They aren't my people now, but they will be in the future. When your young master is in a good mood, he can take down Donglin Cloud Continent and be the overlord. He can also chase Lingyun sect away and let them eat the northwest wind. Li Yunyang was glanced at by him and was shocked. She suddenly realized that the half-monster teen in front of her wasn't someone she could casually mock. When she heard Zhong Shou's words, she was silent. She didn't have any intention to mock him. Instead, she felt an indescribable heroic spirit that made one admire him. Thinking to herself that if this kid grew up, it wouldn't be impossible for him to unify Donglin Cloud Continent. Chasing Lingyun's sect out of Donglin Cloud Continent was a little exaggerated, but there was a 90% chance of him becoming the overlord of a continent. To be able to kill 100,000 blood killers at the age of 13, he naturally had the ability to look down on the heroes of the world. Zhong Shou laughed for a while before he felt the wind on the roof of the carriage turn cold. Being alone, his laughter was a little boring. Just as he was about to turn around and return to the carriage, suddenly, he felt Xian Yuan Iren's beautiful eyes looking over. Her starry eyes shone brightly, revealing traces of joy and praise. Zhong Shou's brows instantly furrowed as he sighed. He only felt that his body had no strength. The heroic spirit that rose up from before had all disappeared. Listlessly, he returned to the carriage once more. Then, his mind was filled with the matter of mind stones and beast crystals. He had nearly forgotten about the many grade 4 beast crystals he had in the Sanlu Bank these few days. Only at this moment, when he heard about the Mind Stone mine, did he feel the urgency. In just a few short years, there would be hundreds of large and small Mind Stone mines in Donglin Cloud Continent that would appear in the world. and when the spiritual wave rises, this number would increase by several times. The large amount of mind stones produced was one of the reasons why the price of beast crystals swiftly fell. Thinking about the hundreds of thousands of people risking their lives for a small mind stone mine, with numerous casualties, it was really amusing. Chapter 136. Thinking about the hundreds of thousands of people fighting to the death for a small mind stone mine, with numerous casualties, it was really amusing. In just a few years, be it mind stones or beast crystals, they would all drop to an unbelievable price. Speaking of which, I should quickly exchange for the beast crystals in my hands. However, mind stone mine? A ball of light exploded out in Samuraim's mind before quickly disappearing. Since it was a newly discovered mind stone mine, then who knows if the mine core had been taken by someone. Speaking of which, it was time for Little Gold to swallow beast crystals once more. However, if it changed to mind stones, it would be perfect. Anyways, in these 2 days, he needed to wait for a few people nearby. Lien Fan also needed a period of time to complete what he asked of him, so it would be good to go over and take a look. Making up his mind, Zhong Shou closed his eyes and sat cross-legged, continuing to perfect the world-shocking spiritual art. When night fell, Zhong Shou once again put on the set of lightning traveling spirit bone. When he walked out of the carriage, he instinctively looked at the other carriage not far away, hesitating slightly. Li Yunyang, who was guarding outside the carriage, instantly showed a wary expression, like an angry cat. "What do you want to do?" "Little Miss is in secluded meditation." Zhong Shou's mind instinctively flashed with the image of Xianyuan Iren's naked body with flames spewing out around her, and his heart couldn't help but shake. In his heart, he actually had the thought of charging in and doing something. Anyways, Li Yunyang couldn't stop him. Following which he shook his head. Zhong Shou was secretly shocked. Did she refine the chill spirit mysterious sense pill so quickly? Now that she was in secluded meditation, she was probably solving the problem from before. Not bothering much about it, Zhong Shou directly jumped off the carriage, his body flashing as he flew forward. Chu Shui didn't even need to say anything, immediately following behind. Li Yunyang felt that it was strange. She wanted to drive the Wind Rider chariot to follow them, but when she saw Zhong Shou and Li Yunyang directly enter the dense forest and disappear into the hills, she could only reluctantly give up on this idea. He rolled his eyes and fell into deep thought. Zhong Shou's thunder-running spirit bone made crackling sounds when he walked, but at this moment, when he ran with all his might, it was as if he was running at lightning speed, incomparably fast. Under Zhong Shou's control, even if he traveled 10 feet in an instant, he would not hit a tree. However, it also consumed a lot of soul power. Zhong Shou's vortex in his soul sea could absorb the spiritual energy of heaven and earth, as well as the drifting soul power. It was replenishing his soul power almost all the time. As a result, he was completely fearless, activating it with all his might. Surprisingly, Chu Shui was able to keep up with him. She was like a white shadow, sticking close to his body. However, after the two of them ran for several tens of miles and arrived at the peak of a mountain, the disparity between them became apparent. Chu Shui panted, her stamina and true qi were all used up. Zhong Shou's expression was normal, only his eyes showed a little tiredness. From start to finish, he did not even move a finger, relying on the external bone to move. What he used up was only soul power. This mountain peak was 7,000 feet high, which was not considered high. However, at this place, it gave off a feeling of looking down on all the other mountains. Casually taking out a soul stone, Zhong Shou formed a hand seal. Instantly, a blue circular talisman appeared in his eyes. The things in his field of vision were swiftly pulled closer. All the mind stone mines are usually near the mountain range, where the earth energy is thick and where the spiritual veins gather. This place is a plain, so the most likely location is this hill. I wonder which direction the vein is in? Looking around, Zhong Shou's eyes suddenly fixed on the south. There seemed to be a battlefield there. Looking out, it was all broken armor and corpses. Who knows how many people died in this battle, attracting numerous scavenging beasts. Occasionally there would be the howls of wolves and beasts. In the sky, there were hundreds of giant vultures circling. Squinting his eyes, Zhong Shou searched around this area. Not long later, his line of sight was fixed on a 4,000-foot-high peak. Smiling slightly, Zhong Shou charged down once more. He knew that Chu Shui was unable to keep up, so he just carried her up and drove the lightning traveling spirit bone over. A short 70 miles, in just 45 minutes, they had already rushed over. When he got close to that small mountain, Zhong Shou's body suddenly stopped. He squinted his eyes and looked into the distance. There were 2 giant barracks here, clearly separated as they faced off against one another. Each barracks had hundreds of thousands of people. Just taking a look, he knew that they were all elite soldiers. Even the soldiers with the lowest combat strength were grade 2 martial warriors, no weaker than their Gantian mountain. Injecting soul power into his eyes, he looked into the distance. He could also see dozens of energy glows charging into the sky, mixing with the vital energy of hundreds of thousands of people. Zhong Shou couldn't help but frown slightly. In the last life, he had seen armies fighting. However, at that time he was already at the Ascended Realm and was a martial cultivator, so he didn't feel anything. Looking out now, he couldn't help but feel shocked. There weren't many experts in the barracks, only tens of Xiantian. However, if there were experts who knew the strength of the martial path, they could cause even Xuanwu ancestors to avoid them. The vital energy of tens of thousands of people mixed together was the nemesis of spirit masters. If one wasn't at the return to Sun Realm, any spell that got close would be dissipated by the rising vital energy. Looking on for a moment, Zhong Shou laughed bitterly. This huge army was the hardest to deal with. After he awoke that day, he didn't choose to disguise himself and conceal himself to avoid being pursued, and he'd still chosen the magnificent and extremely striking Cloudcross carriage. The reason was this: the cloud-stepping foals were extremely quick, and the carriage could float in the air. Even if others knew where they were, they wouldn't be able to attack. Without a mount of the same grade, no one below Xiantian Master could catch up. As for those cloud-stepping foals, even a huge power like Gantian Mountain didn't have many of them. However, once one was noticed, thousands or even tens of thousands of troops would surround and kill one. No matter how skilled one was, one would die. Speaking of which, the most dangerous part of his journey back to Gantian Mountain was the latter part. That Yunxia Mountain and Blazing Flame Mountain were only at the west of the Cloud Continent. They were hundreds of thousands of miles away from Dian Mountain. Even if they wanted him to die, they could send some elites over. However, once he reached their territory, with the foundations of these 2 powers, it wasn't impossible for them to send millions of troops to surround and kill him. To return safely, he needed to find some Windrider foals as backup. He totally gave up on the idea of using the Hidden Shadow spell to sneak in. Zhong Shou didn't give up just like that. A Mind Stone mine spread out tens of miles. He didn't have to choose this place to enter. After retreating for several miles, Zhong Shou started to set up the formation. Nearby was the army camp, and there were tens of Xiantian masters. He didn't dare to make too much noise. He hastily set up tens of runes and placed 12 grade 3 beast crystals. Chu Shui was at the side and had already recovered some stamina. At this moment she was just standing there quietly. Although she was curious, she didn't say a word. Looking at Zhong Shou activating the spell and chanting, the ground beneath his feet suddenly trembled. Suddenly, the ground beneath his feet began to sway slightly, and a muffled cracking sound rang out as a dozen or so cracks appeared on the ground. With the spiritual formation under Zhong Shou's feet as the starting point, it swiftly spread out. A few of them were thicker and stretched towards the south. However, it was the opposite of the direction of the two army camp. Along with the 12 earth element beast crystals exploding, only then did Zhong Shou stop his hand signs and chanting. His expression was cold as he looked at the direction of the cracks. A few hundred years later, the cloud world and the other worlds started to be connected. Some of the cloud world's specialties started to spread out to other worlds. The secret manuals of other worlds, talisman spells and some rare items were also grasped by the people of the cloud world. At this moment, what Zhong Shou was using was an earth element spell passed down from other worlds, the spirit searching technique. It had no other use, only being able to identify mind stone mines. Its effects were really effective. In these close to 100 years, the mind stone mines that were found in the cloud world dried up in just 3,000 years. The reason why there were still mind stones appearing in Zhong Shou's era was because of trading with other worlds. Secondly, relying on this spell, one would be able to find some small-sized mind stone mines. It is actually a grade 2 mine. Zhong Shou was deep in thought as he looked at where the two army camps were. These hundreds of thousands of people didn't even find the mine, and they started to kill each other just for a branch vein? After laughing involuntarily, Zhong Shou continued to focus and look at the cracks. The mine stones here were really scattered, so he wasn't willing to spend effort to search for them. He was only looking for the possible location of the mine core. The results were really delightful. Each mine core was the essence of an entire mine gathered. The surroundings were often covered in mine stones, filled with spiritual energy. At this moment, the cracks on the ground could be seen at one glance. One could easily deduce which area was filled with spiritual energy. There was only one area where there might be a mine stone mine core. However, below there was a broken mark. The situation behind it couldn't be seen. 70 feet below is actually an underground river. Zhong Shou couldn't help but feel a headache. Luckily, he had confirmed the location, and he just needed to spend some effort. They dashed towards the south, passing through the dense forest. After 20 miles, Zhong Shou stopped. At this moment, Chu Shui's face was filled with shock. She followed Zhong Shou around the mountain for the entire night. Who knew what they were going to do? Zhong Shou rolled up his sleeves and was about to pull out his lightning tooth sword to dig a hole. Only then did he remember that he was an out-of-body realm spirit master. Why would he need to personally do it? With a thought, Zhong Shou found 3 pieces of granite that were roughly the height of a person and of slightly better quality. First, he used spiritual ink to draw a talisman formation, burying 5 grade 3 earth element beast crystals and 2 beast spirit stones. As he chanted, Zhong Shou's hands formed a seal. These 3 pieces of granite instantly cracked open. Heads and limbs appeared one after another. In just a moment, 3 giant stone puppets suddenly stood up from the ground. They were roughly 20 feet tall, their bodies burly and muscular, extremely strong. To be continued. Chapter 137. Although the 3 stone puppets had soul stones placed in them, they didn't have any consciousness. They could only be controlled by Zhong Shou using a few threads of his mind. To him, this was an incomparably novel experience. At first, due to its lack of experience, the stone puppet wobbled and fell several times. When Zhong Shou slowly familiarized himself with it and understood how to control it, an hour had passed. First, he stretched his legs and stretched his arms. Then, he walked to the spot that Zhong Shou pointed out and started to use his stone arms to dig. Apart from the stone puppet's movements being slightly clumsy, it had immense strength, a full 20,000 kilograms of strength. Each time the stone palm dug down, it could dig out large amounts of soil. In just a moment it dug down 100 feet. When it faced tough stone, Zhong Shou would use the lightning tooth sword to forcefully break it. This stone puppet is really not bad. The spiritual techniques of spirit masters are really exquisite and unpredictable. They have many uses and are really useful. However, the cost of these puppets was huge. One grade 3 beast crystal was 100,000 silver. In the cloud world, it was enough to become a rich family. Only Zhongsho, who had huge amounts of wealth in the Sanlu Bank and knew that beast crystals and soul stones wouldn't be worth much in the future, dared to squander them like that. 10 beast crystals and 2 soul stones of the same grade were really expensive. However, these 3 stone puppets could be used for 2 months, and he didn't need to worry about spiritual energy and essence energy running out. It was like he had 3 more experts whose strength could compare to 9 Meridian Mythic Masters, so it wasn't a big loss. His digging speed was really quick. In just an hour, he had easily dug to the bottom. This was a roughly 50 feet tall natural tunnel. Below it was a shallow stream. At this moment, his rising moon lion was hiding not far away. It would naturally guard the whole outside. Zhongsho didn't hesitate, bringing the 3 stone puppets and jumping down, only to see the 2 sides of the tunnel shine with starlight. They were densely packed with crystals of various colors. At this moment, Chu Shui roughly understood Zhongsho's intention. Along with Zhongsho, after jumping into the river below, he looked around in shock at the crystals that were reflecting light. "Young master, are these spirit stones?" Chu Shui thought to herself. If they dug out all these spirit stones, wouldn't they make a fortune? One spirit stone, even if it was the lowest grade one, was worth 10 times more than a grade 1 beast crystal. Zhongsho couldn't help but laugh and continue forward. If spirit stones were so easy to find, they wouldn't be so expensive. The crystals here could also be considered as spirit stones. However, it wasn't ranked, and its effects were minimal. Even those spirit masters below the soul observing realm disdained to use it. In the eyes of others, it might be an unimaginable amount of wealth, but in his eyes, it was the same as trash. He really didn't have the time to care about it. However, as he continued forward, he spread his soul remembrance in all directions, searching up, down, left, and right in this underground tunnel. This place was underground, and although the wind blew, it didn't hurt his soul. In the past, Zhongsho could only stretch his spiritual sense out 100 feet. At this moment, it reached 300 feet and he didn't find it tiring. However, he was unable to go deep into the earth layer. I heard that an out-of-body realm spirit master can stretch his spiritual sense 10 feet into the earth. As for the night roaming realm, it tripled in size, reaching a height of 10 meters. At the return to sun realm, it can reach 100 feet. However, at the day wandering realm, it can reach 1,000 feet. At that realm, one just needs to sweep with their spiritual sense to know where there are spirit stones in the spirit stone mines. It really makes one envious. However, this method is only useful in low-grade mines. Large mines all have spiritual energy materialized, and even spirit masters find it hard to get close. Zhongsho's spiritual sense could only reach 5 feet into the earth layer. With such a range, the chances of finding spirit stones were really small. He spread his spiritual sense out, but he didn't have much hope. There were many forks in this path. In just a short 10 miles, there were dozens of forks of unknown depth. When he walked to a corner of the underground tunnel, Zhongsho's eyes lit up. He ordered the 3 stone puppets to dig to the side. After digging about half a foot into the stone wall, a few dark blue transparent crystals appeared. There were exactly 3 of them, each about the size of a fist. Chu Shui was slightly shocked. Right away, she noticed that these blue transparent crystals were different from the other crystals on the stone walls. They were bright and transparent, and the spiritual energy within was several times that of the surrounding crystals. If one took a closer look, they would be able to see something that looked like water flowing slowly within. It contained pure essence and spiritual energy. Even if one absorbed it into one's body, one could easily refine it without any side effect. Chu Shui was startled for a moment, not daring to confirm. A moment later, she hesitated. "Young master, are these grade 4 crystals?" "Above grade 3 and not grade 4. However, it is already not bad. Zhong Shou casually kept it into the bag by his waist, his expression expressionless. Grade 3 mind stones could be compared to Grade 4 beast crystals. In his heart, he felt a little regretful. Although he could use these water element mind stones, they weren't the type he wanted. However, this place was really close to the mine core. A mid-sized Grade 2 mine, only the area with the most spiritual energy would have Grade 3 mind stones. Continuing forwards, roughly 900 feet, Zhong Shou ordered the 3 puppets to stop. The place where the cracks showed was broken was here. However, looking at this place, he couldn't find the reason why the spiritual energy split. Slightly sensing, the heaven and earth spiritual energy here was really abundant and there was no difference. Could it be that the ore has already been taken by someone? However, there are no signs of it being dug up. What is the reason for that? Zhong Shou's brows furrowed, his heart filled with questions. On the stone wall, he drew another spiritual formation. This time, the runes that were drawn were even more intricate, and the lines were even purer. He picked out 4 Grade 3 Earth Element Beast crystals and tried his best to choose the purest ones to inscribe on. However, when he activated his spell, many cracks opened up. The thickest and biggest one still reached down and stopped halfway. Then, it spread out like it was blocked by some power and couldn't reach in. Zhong Shou's eyes constricted. The effect of this spiritual searching technique was proven numerous times in the future. A situation like this was truly abnormal. Thinking about it carefully, it wasn't like there weren't any similar examples. Firstly, there is a treasure below that blocks my spell. Secondly, the mind stones here exceed Grade 3 and are above Grade 6. However, how is that possible? The last possibility is that there are other beasts or spirits under this layer of soil. Zhong Shou's brows furrowed, showing a wary expression. Tens of spiritual talismans shot out from his sleeves. He chanted and caused them to burn. Around Zhong Shou and Chu Shui, an earth-yellow glow appeared. Even the 3 earth puppets had a layer of light around them. His body seemed to have become a lot more sturdy and his strength had also increased by a lot. Since the spiritual searching technique was unable to work, then he would forcefully dig. The moment Zhong Shou's enchanted, the black wave sword charged into the air and struck downward. Not long later, the stone below was sliced into pieces. The 3 earth puppets were also on guard while moving the stone pieces away. Roughly 100 feet away, Zhong Shou's eyes squinted, his right hand pressing on the lightning-toothed sword in the sheath on his left. However, when the stone puppets forcefully dug out, Zhong Shou was shocked. Zhong Shou couldn't help but be startled as he looked downwards, only to see a purple plate-shaped stone block lying below. Even his black wave sword couldn't break it and was sent flying back. His soul sense and intent couldn't enter either. Then, the stone puppets dug away the sand at the side before taking out the stone. Only to see that it was 30 feet wide, the thickest part was only a foot. One could see threads of purple gold patterns all over the stone board. Zhong Shou was slightly shocked, using his sword to touch it, giving out the sharp sound of metal clashing. Then, his expression became really weird. It wasn't a treasure. It wasn't a Grade 6 mind stone, nor was it some soul or beast. It was just a metal ore that was formed together with the mind stone mind core. In the end, it was because he had too little experience that he made such a huge mistake. He wasted tens of talismans. Luckily, Chu Shui killed that out-of-body realm spirit master and replenished some. It is actually purple spirit iron. This item is really rare. Using this iron to craft a sword, one can craft a Grade 4 spiritual sword. Such a large piece, since one can craft 4 to 5 swords, it is more than enough. Its value isn't much lower than Grade 6 mind stones. Although this item was good, Zhong Shou had no use for it at the moment. He had all the materials he needed, but where would he go to find a spirit refiner who could craft Grade 4 spiritual swords? Such a large piece was tough to move. Sighing, Zhong Shou let a stone puppet carry the stone board and continued to look downwards. His eyes constricted, his pupils constricting into a needle shape. Then, he blinked his eyes in disbelief. After a short while, he pinched Chu Shui's cheeks, using strength to pull, asking curiously, "Shui, does it hurt? Are the two of us dreaming?" Chu Shui forcefully broke free from Zhong Shou's hand, her eyes filled with tears as she looked at Zhong Shou with a wronged expression. "It hurts. Young master, you bully me, why did you pull me?" "Shui didn't do anything wrong." Zhong Shou shook his head, thinking that it was right to say that it hurt. At this moment, he really wasn't dreaming. Only to see that below, a pure black, crystal-like spiritual grass was growing in the soil under the black stone board. The leaves and roots were all black, translucent, making one suspect whether or not this grass was alive. At the end of it there was a flower bud, numerous thread-like black petals tightly wrapped around it, exposing it to Zhong Shou's line of sight. Zhong Shou sucked in a cold breath, still not daring to confirm. A ball of flame lit up in his hand as he carefully analyzed it. However, be it the roots, leaves, or the flame, they were exactly the same as what was described in the books. Darkness blooming Sirius. It is actually the darkness blooming Sirius. Chapter 138. Darkness blooming Sirius. It really is the darkness blooming Sirius. Zhong Shou was startled for a long while, unable to believe it. Could it be that he had received some sort of heavenly mandate? His luck was actually so good. He just wanted to dig the core of a grade 2 mined stone mine, but he actually dug out purple spirit iron and then bumped into such a treasure. Darkness blooming Sirius. Just from its name, one would know that such a spiritual herb needed to grow in a dark environment. Based on what Zhong Shou knew, not only did such a spiritual herb need to be filled with spiritual energy, it also couldn't see any light or air. Once one came into contact with it, one would instantly die. However, after it formed a bud, it needed to be exposed to the air before it could bloom. It only had a short lifespan of 10 breaths before it withered. This item couldn't raise energy training cultivation and also couldn't increase soul power. However, after it bloomed, the seeds it produced had a special ability that could make all spirit masters go crazy for it. Even he couldn't help but be tempted by it. His breathing couldn't help but become heavy as Zhong Shou pinched his arm. Under the piercing pain, he didn't lose his focus. Although this darkness blooming Sirius was good, it needed to bloom before it could be picked. At this moment, there were still a full 24 hours until it bloomed. A full day later, he would be able to get it. Once again, he controlled the stone puppets to continue digging. However, he carefully avoided the darkness blooming Sirius and went in from the side. As expected, this place was where the mine core was. After digging for 4 hours, he obtained dozens of grade 3 mined stones, making Zhong Shou smile. Their attributes were different. There were many water element ones, probably due to this underground stream. Next would be earth element mined stones, taking up a small half. Mined stones were mostly produced in places with thick earth energy, which was why no matter which mined stone mine it was, there would definitely be earth element mined stones. As for the spirit stone ore, it was buried about 300 feet below the surface of the tunnel. It was close to 800 feet from the ground. When Zhong Shou noticed this item, he had already ordered the 3 stone puppets to dig for 8 hours. This mined stone mine core was different from mined stones. It was silvery white and looked like a goose egg. It was no different from an ordinary stone. However, he could sense that the spiritual energy contained within was 4 times that of a normal spirit stone. It's actually a metal type or core. Zhong Shou's eyes were filled with a sense of guilt. This time, he guessed wrong again. Originally, after digging out so many water-type and earth-type spirit stones, he had assumed that the ore cores would be of these 2 attributes. In the end, what was dug out was completely unrelated to the heptagold. Yes, As the saying goes, metal breeds water. This was also a place where the earth veins were thick, and there was also that piece of purple spirit iron Oregon. I'm the one who's inexperienced and inexperienced. The knowledge he read in books and the actual practice were indeed two different things. No matter how hard he tried to sense the ore core, it didn't give him any more surprises. The metal-type spiritual energy inside was abundant, but only two relatively strong spiritual energy veins could be identified. The so-called ore core was no different from the vein spiritual pearl. The difference was that the former was naturally condensed. Many spiritual veins gathered underground, reacting with one another to form a mind stone mine. The so-called ore core was the product of many spiritual veins colliding and even merging. Many spiritual veins were formed within. Every medium-sized and above mind stone mine would have one to several ore cores. There was also a chance that there wouldn't be a single one. As for the vein spiritual pearl, it was totally man-made. He felt Little Gold's reaction slowly becoming more and more intense in his left arm. Zhong Shou couldn't help but smile. This little fellow was really lucky today. Although the metal type or core disappointed him. Only the water type, lightning type, and fire type attributes could be converted into the vein spiritual pearl. Only then would it be of great help to him. However, these two metal type spiritual veins were not bad either. He could directly merge with that grade 2 metal type vein spiritual pearl. After grade 4, he could barely reach the requirements to become an external pill. The spiritual energy here is no less than some spiritual lands. It's most probably because the darkness blooming Sirius and the purple spirit iron ore swallowed too much spiritual energy. If not, this mind stone mine wouldn't just be grade 2, it would at least raise by half a grade. After obtaining the ore core, Zhong Shou still didn't give up. He continued to search around. As expected, in 4 hours, he found another 20 grade 3 mind stones. This time, it was the gold mind stones that exploded. There were a total of 17, a large half of the total. When he used his spiritual sense to search around, he couldn't find any traces of the mind stones. Only then did he order the puppet to stop. There should be many mind stones buried nearby. However, the location was really hidden and hard to confirm. He also wasn't willing to waste time searching. Climbing out of the giant hole that he dug, Zhong Shou looked at the darkness blooming Sirius once more. His eyes couldn't help but show a troubled expression. His original plan was to come quickly and return quickly. He would be able to return in a night. However, to wait for the Sirius blooming Sirius to bloom, it would take at least a few hours. However, even if he used his feet to think about this matter, he knew how to choose. There are 14 hours until the darkness blooming Sirius. Forget it. I can let Little Gold swallow all these mind stones. Zhong Shou directly chose a slightly more spacious area nearby. Then, he ordered the 3 puppets to dig to the side and open up a wider area. It was 60 feet to the left, right, front, and back. However, when Zhong Shou started to lay out the formation, he felt a headache. At this moment, the grade 3 beast crystals in his bag were close to dry up. He spent a lot of effort and added in 2 mind stones before he was barely able to gather enough. The natural essence energy and soul energy in the mind stones were extremely pure, no weaker than the essence energy he absorbed from the lightning phoenix egg. Actually, Little Gold could directly swallow it. Zhong Shou laid out this formation not to absorb the mind stones but for other uses. Looking around in satisfaction, Zhong Shou tossed 2 metal element mind stones to Chu Shui, who was standing at the side like a dumb goose. You won't be able to learn anything from this. Go to the side and use these 2 mind stones. You have already swallowed 2 human pinnacle pills, and with the help of these mind stones, in a few days you should be able to reach the spirit cultivation realm. You are giving this stone to me? Chu Shui grabbed the mind stones in her hand, her face filled with confusion. But how should I use it? She hadn't cultivated in a long time. Every day she would just habitually cultivate her soul power and was unable to break through to the soul-observing realm. Although she had learned the method to absorb mind stones in the past, she didn't have a chance to come into contact with it these few years and had long forgotten about it. Zhong Shou's face instantly turned green, looking extremely unsightly. Chu Shui gave an awkward smile. For some reason she felt guilty, laughing dryly. Ah ye! Young master, Shui remembered, she had some impression. No, I remember it really clearly. How could I forget? Zhong Shou frowned, his heart moved, his expression turning calm. Shui, if you don't understand then just say it. I won't scold you. Oh right, I drew a total of 3 talisman formations. Did you learn anything? The talismans used are really common, you should have learned them before. This time he could have gone alone to obtain the ore core. The reason why he let Chu Shui follow was to let her observe him drawing the talismans and laying out the formations. In the world, there was no better way to understand the true meaning of talismans than directly observing the process of high-grade spirit masters and talisman masters drawing talismans. Which was why spirit masters, be it 10,000 years ago or 10,000 years later, emphasized the legacy the most. Chu Shui instantly heaved a sigh of relief, but she still didn't dare to believe it. Her eyes filled with a pitiful look as she asked, "Really? Young master really won't scold me?" Zhong Shou nodded his head, barely calming down, still blinking his eyes. "Young master, you promised not to scold me, you promised?" Shui forgot all about it. I have already learned to absorb the spiritual power of mind stones for many years. How would I remember? And those talismans, they recognize Shui, but Shui doesn't recognize them. I forgot about it long ago. Zhong Shou was furious, not waiting for Chu Shui to finish before he grabbed Chu Shui's face, pinching left and right. "You are still so confident. If you don't know talismans, what kind of spirit master are you? Why don't you just cultivate martial arts?" Seeing that Chu Shui's eyes were slightly red, her watery eyes shining like stars, her chin fiercely nodding like she wanted to tell him that she would just cultivate martial arts. Talismans and spells were so troublesome, she didn't want to learn them. Zhong Shou couldn't help but laugh in anger, adding more strength. "You dumb girl, your combat martial body is not bad. You don't need to study those sword and fist theories to reach the peak of the martial path. However, if you meet those really sick people in the future, you are dead for sure, do you know? After cultivating spiritual techniques, at least if you can't beat them, you can escape. You still want to act cute in front of me? There is no use in acting pitiful. When you go back, copy the desolate talisman scripture 100 times. Do you hear me?" In the end, he couldn't win against the killing power of Chu Shui's gaze, and he was also afraid that he would really ruin her face. After punishing her a little, Zhong Shou let go. Chu Shui instantly jumped up, dodging to the side, her 2 hands covering her face as she cried, "Young master, you didn't keep your words, you said you wouldn't scold me. I directly pinched you, not scolded you. Why didn't I keep my words?" Zhong Shou was slightly delighted while thinking about the feeling just now. His face turned serious as he started to teach her the chant to absorb the Mind Stone. When a martial cultivator absorbed the energy within the Mind Stone, they just needed to activate their true qi and directly absorb it. It was a little more troublesome for spirit masters as they needed to use spiritual techniques to draw out the spiritual energy within. After teaching her the chant, there were also a few talismans that needed to be used. Zhong Shou was worried that this brat didn't understand and would waste the Mind Stone. He taught her a few more times before letting her sit at the side and start to absorb the Mind Stone. Zhong Shou sat at the center of the spiritual formation, allowing little gold to slide down from his arm. If the octopus beast wanted to swallow something, it was really simple, it just needed to throw the Mind Stone over. In just a few minutes, Zhong Shou saw an entire Mind Stone being ground into dust by little gold. It actually didn't let go of a single trace of spiritual energy. After absorbing all of it, it spat out all of the remaining powder. It was also grade 3, but this mind stone didn't give it any pain or burden. Chapter 139. Each spirit stone would take about half an hour or so. Little Gold only swallowed 16 mind stones before it was unable to swallow any more. Its body swelled up once more, but it didn't seem to be in pain. It jumped into his palm and rubbed against his palm intimately. Zhong Shou laughed, taking out the mind core and placing it in front of him. His expression slowly became solemn. He bit his finger and drew 2 talismans outside of the mind core. One was shock, the other was crack. His eyes lit up as he hollered, "Break!" The spirit stone or core immediately trembled and countless cracks appeared on its surface. It only lasted for a moment before it totally shattered. Instantly 2 silver-white streaks of light surged out from within. They were like giant pythons, one left and one right as they charged out. There was a so-called dragon vein in the world. Even if a mortal obtained it, he or she could be called a king. Actually, the dragon vein was just a large amount of source spiritual energy gathered. Once it was spread out, it was like a giant dragon, not relying on the energy of the earth as it roamed between heaven and earth. In front of Zhong Shou were 2 small-sized metal element spiritual veins. However, the moment they charged out of the mind core, they were like pythons, giving off a shocking aura. However, when the 2 giant pythons were only about 4 zhang away, an invisible barrier suddenly appeared and forcefully repelled them. Zhong Shou didn't dare to be careless. He knew that his spiritual formation was of a low grade and wouldn't be able to last for too long. He formed a seal with his right hand and once again chanted out, "Attract." Following which, in Zhong Shou's hand, a ball of light exploded out from within Little Gold's stomach. Those 2 spiritual veins seemed to be forcefully attracted by a power as they gathered in front of him. At the start, Little Gold was a little uneasy and tried to struggle. A moment later, it realized that the 2 balls of silver-white light not only didn't harm it, but instead had some benefit. Only then did it calm down. It allowed the 2 giant pythons to drill into its stomach. Only after 6 hours did the 2 metal elemental spiritual veins completely merge into the spiritual vein pearl. The entire process seemed like there were no twists and turns, going smoothly. However, when Zhong Shou was done, his forehead was covered in sweat and his face was extremely pale. Compared to the intense battle with Li Yaling that day, he was even more exhausted. These spirit veins did not have their own consciousness, so they could be controlled. However, they were naturally agile and had the characteristics of wandering and dispersing. They were also very sensitive to changes in spiritual energy. The most difficult part just now was not luring it over, but trapping it. Instead, for a full 6 hours, he was fully focused, such that his soul sense and the spiritual energy of heaven and earth were in perfect harmony. It also required a large amount of soul power to prevent the spirit vein from escaping or spilling out. Therefore, the exhaustion was so great that it was no different from fighting against a strong enemy, fighting with all his strength for 6 hours. This spirit vein is indeed extremely difficult to control. No wonder that spiritual vein pearl needed at least a return to Sun Realm spirit master to craft. It would be extremely difficult to capture them. To draw it into the spiritual vein pearl, one would need a huge amount of soul power and precise control of spiritual energy. Every time he added a new one, the difficulty would increase tenfold. To find materials that could store spiritual veins would be even more difficult. My metal element spiritual vein pearl can store up to 5 spiritual veins, which is already really rare. Iran's external pill was worth a city. Today I was lucky to find this core. The spiritual veins within were originally really gentle, which was why the pearl could successfully upgrade. When the last bit of light was swallowed by the spiritual vein pearl, Zhong Shou sat down cross-legged. Zhong Shou sat cross-legged and entered meditation. Only when the darkness blooming Sirius gave out a spiritual energy fluctuation did he wake up. However, he still didn't recover much of his energy, and his eyes were still filled with exhaustion. His face was filled with excitement. With a thought, the thin film that little gold turned into started to spread around his upper arm. It then covered his chest and abdomen, as if it was a close-fitting silver armor that covered his entire upper body. Countless tiny needles drilled into his muscles and connected with his meridians and acupoints. At this moment, Xiao Jin seemed to be an extension of his physical body. At the same time, the spirit vein pearl, which had already advanced to the 4th grade, was also transmitting streams of immense spiritual power into Nie Tian's body through Xiao Jin. The energy in Zhong Shou's body was suddenly filled up, surging and rumbling, continuously boiling. The strength of his entire body seemed to have increased by several times in an instant. The movement of his body caused the spiritual energy of heaven and earth, especially the interference of the metal element, to slowly increase. The true qi in his body moved, and he could gather large amounts of spiritual energy. This is Xiantian. A feeling that he hadn't felt in a long time rose up in Zhong Shou's heart, and his mental state also fluctuated. Even at this moment, he used the power of the external pill to reach the Xiantian realm, but it still made it hard for him to control himself. At this moment, what was surging in his body was true qi, power that he could use as he pleased. Exhaling, Zhong Shou stabbed out with his sword. At the tip of the lightning-toothed sword, a streak of sword energy shot out, giving out a sharp qi sound. Only when it was 60 feet out did it dissipate. Stone dust splattered, and a small hole appeared on the stone wall. It was extremely sharp and silent. It isn't the lightning element that I wanted, nor is it the water element that can fully display the cloud-shocking god-destroying sword intent. However, it has the sharpness of the metal element. No one below a spiritual weapon can block this sword. He also caused the hiltless black wave sword to fly out, not holding it in his hand. Only a thread of true power was injected into the sword, and another thread of sword energy surged out, reaching 70 feet. This sword had been nurtured by the broken blade sword for close to 200 years, and had some metal fragment sword intent. At this moment, when Zhong Shou injected large amounts of metal element spiritual energy into it, it instantly had a chemical reaction. My sword energy can reach 60 feet out, which means that my current physical strength can reach 60,000 kilograms. 30,000 kilograms of strength can be used to send energy out of the body. After that, for every 10,000 kilograms of strength, it can increase by 10 feet. If I go all out, I can go up against those Xiantian experts without spiritual vein pearls. Unfortunately, I am not a true Xiantian expert. Although I can use it, I can't use it for long. The reason why an earth wheel expert could surpass a body wheel expert in all aspects, apart from absorbing the spiritual energy of heaven and earth to train the body. Using external forces to train the foundation chakra, breath chakra, marrow chakra, bone chakra, blood chakra, intellect chakra, organ chakra, and outer chakra. The biggest difference was merging with spiritual veins. Every time a chakra was formed, one could choose a spiritual vein to merge into the body and merge with the chakra. Other people could only rely on their physical strength to reach the mythic master realm before they could borrow some power from heaven and earth. However, Xiantian masters had many spiritual veins in their bodies that were self-sufficient and didn't fear drying up. How could body wheel experts fight against them? How could their physical strength not be strong? This was the reason why the martial artist stage was called the earth wheel level. Spiritual veins also had grades. Small spiritual veins relied on the energy of the earth, which was why they were called earth veins. Using the external pill could allow him to gain the strength to go up against Xiantian masters in a short period of time. However, the problem was that his body was still at the body wheel level, and his meridians were weak and couldn't support it. However, He didn't have much stamina. Once he fought with someone, no matter if he won or lost, he could only last for a cup of tea or two, so he wasn't worried about that. What was a pity was that grade 4 spiritual vein pearls didn't have much power to borrow. Using Little Gold's body to transfer power was even rarer. Zhong Shou helplessly shook his head, and Little Gold's body started to retract. It once again gathered in his left hand, wrapping tightly around it like a protective wall. With this external pill, before I reach the Xiantian realm, I can handle it. Even if it were those grandmasters, I would still be able to escape unscathed. At this moment, I'm a little curious whether my dual meridian body can merge with spiritual veins. At the Earth Chakra realm, merging 18 spiritual veins into my body, is that possible? Zhong Shou was in deep thought, thinking back to the records of dual meridian body cultivation. There weren't any examples of success, and it wasn't specifically mentioned. Presumably, no one had done it before. However, this was a precedent. Presumably, no one had spiral meridians like his. No one could be like him, creating such a shocking spiritual art with water, fire, and lightning elements intertwining spirals. Suddenly, a ball of energy shot out from his palm. He looked at the blue and red chi forces that attracted and repelled each other. Zhong Shou laughed, grabbing it and extinguishing it. Such a possibility made one look forward to it. However, it was still too early to think about it. It wouldn't be too late to think about it after he broke open the body wheel. Stepping off the ground, Zhong Shou lightly floated to the side of the hole. He coldly looked at the darkness blooming Sirius. The spiritual energy fluctuation of this item was extremely intense and unstable, like it was on the verge of exploding. Only when it reached an extreme did it stabilize. Then, the flower petals began to blossom at a speed visible to the naked eye. Zhong Shou held his breath. The pure black color of the petals was extremely beautiful in his eyes. What flower is this? So beautiful! Chu Shui, who had long finished absorbing the Mind Stone, also walked to the side of the stone hole. Her face was filled with confusion. She unconsciously reached out her hand to touch it, but Zhong Shou grabbed it. When the darkness blooming Sirius completely bloomed, Zhong Shou didn't advance, but instead retreated. He brought Chu Shui and retreated 100 feet away. In the next moment, a ball of black mist was spat out. It spread for dozens of feet, silently corroding a large portion of the surrounding soil. When Chu Shui saw the situation, her face couldn't help but turn pale. Such a beautiful flower also contained lethal poison. Just now, if she had retreated a little slower, or if her hand had touched the flower, her body would have been melted. Zhong Shou was unfazed, directly casting a spell. He summoned a breeze to blow away the black mist. Only when there was nothing left did he go deeper and come to the side of the stone hole. Just as he was looking at the blooming and withering of the epiphyllum, the entire hole suddenly started to shake and sand started to fall. Zhong Shou's brows furrowed slightly as he looked into the distance. He could hear some people's voices, and there were many of them who were walking in this direction. Chapter 140. That sound spread out along with the slight wind in the tunnel, and should be 20 miles away. Who knows how many explosive talismans were used to open up the path to give out such a huge sound. The speed at which they moved over was also really quick. In just an instant they were close to 1,000 feet. Zhong Shou's expression didn't change. He was still calm as he quietly waited for the darkness blooming Sirius in front of him to wither. The last bit of petals also withered. Within the heart of the flower, there were finally 3 strawberry-like black fruits that slowly reached out. Just as these 3 fruits were about to fall to the ground, Zhong Shou caught them. The darkness blooming Sirius was poisonous, but these spiritual fruits weren't. Instead, they were fragrant and the color was tempting. When Zhong Shou received them, he immediately placed them into a porcelain bottle. Then, without hesitation, He used 2 spells to reduce the sound and smell, bringing Chu Shui to turn around and leave. However, just as they walked 5 to 6 miles, before they even got close to the deep hole that he opened up, the voices from before were already inches away. Another branch of the tunnel that had been washed out by the underground stream was rapidly approaching. It was less than 2 li away from them. Hearing the footsteps get closer and closer, Zhong Shou's brows furrowed. Then, he felt helpless. With the speed of these people, they wouldn't be able to avoid them even if they wanted to. If they continued like this, they would be noticed sooner or later. Those auras that were getting closer didn't try to hide at all. There were many experts amongst them. Apart from a few Xiantian realm experts, there were even out-of-body realm spirit masters and martial ancestors. At this moment, he had such a huge treasure on him, so coming into contact with them wasn't a wise choice. Looking around, Zhong Shou had an idea. He looked up and saw that there was a natural depression in the dome. Thinking about it seriously, Zhong Shou once again used a sound-ending technique and a spirit-silencing talisman. It caused the spiritual energy fluctuations and sounds to be temporarily silent. Then, he grabbed Chu Shui and headed towards the dome. As for the 3 stone puppets, they were climbing up the mountain. He inserted his hands and feet into the soil above him. After that, their bodies changed. In just a short moment, they were no different from ordinary granite, firmly covering their figures. The 2 of them had just hidden themselves and concealed their auras. From the hidden gap that was purposely left open, he saw a group of people walking over from the other side. The 2 people at the front were clad in heavy armor and looked like generals. Their footsteps were heavy, but they were both innate experts. After the 2 of them, there was another middle-aged man. He wore a green robe, and there were faint black spirit tattoos on his hands and neck. Looking at the pattern, it seemed to be a spirit array that extended all the way to his cheeks. A blue flame hung above his head, illuminating the cave as if it was daytime, but it also gave off a gloomy aura. Beside him was an old man in his 50s. His hair was dark red, and his eyes seemed to contain electricity. He gave off a valiant bandit aura. Behind them were 29 Meridian mythic masters. There was also a group of people who looked to be in a sorry state being dragged along by these martial masters with chains. Most of them had the characteristics of beasts, to varying degrees. Some had beast ears, some had beast tails, and some had thick hair. However, all of them were covered in wounds, and only had some broken footprints to cover their bodies. Their hands and feet were all shackled. Some of the more muscular ones had steel nails that pierced through their joints and bones, and some directly broke their tendons and tendons. Most of them could only use their hands and feet to barely keep up. If they were slightly slower, they would be whipped by the mythic masters. Chu Shui's body instantly tensed up. Zhong Shou's brows also furrowed. These people who were shackled were all from the monster race. Following which he turned his gaze to the few people in front of him. Those 2 Xiantian masters weren't worth paying attention to. Not only could they not compare to 100,000 blood-killer Li Yaling, but they were also far from deceitful sword Rin Qianshou and the others. At most, they were on the same level as that old man surnamed me from Blood Spirit Valley Demon Corpse Mountain. Only that martial ancestor expert and the spirit master needed to pay attention to them. The former's aura was intense and stable, and his vital energy was strong. His martial path had obviously reached a certain level. As for that spirit master, he definitely came from a famous sect, or his teacher was an expert in the world. The spiritual formation on his body obviously came from a spirit master above the day-wandering realm. Drawing the god talisman on his body, once he reached the night-wandering realm, he would be able to grasp a certain amount of god talisman spells. This was similar to the god talisman spirit seed left by the Lingyun ancestor. However, the latter's methods were much better. As for drawing the god talisman on his body, unless it was someone he trusted and close to, he definitely couldn't do it. If it wasn't his teacher, it would be his family. These two people weren't easy to deal with. The 20 mythic masters behind them all moved as one, and their weapons and armor were all elite. That day he was able to kill Li Yaling, but he didn't have much confidence in dealing with these people. The middle-aged spirit master had just walked out of the fork in the road when he suddenly stopped and looked around suspiciously. That old man also stopped, his face filled with anticipation. "Mr. Mingjue, why did you stop? Did you notice something?" Mingjue shook his head, still looking around carefully. A moment later, he shook his head. "Maybe it's just my imagination, but the spiritual energy changes here seem a little unnatural. At this fork, where the energy flow intersects, it's a little too silent." That old man was slightly disappointed, following which he was deep in thought. "Speaking of which, I used my spiritual sense to sense and felt that this place wasn't right. Then, I used my spiritual sense to sense it. Apart from the silence of spiritual energy, there wasn't anything abnormal. It most likely formed naturally. Looking at the distribution of the mind stones here, it seems a little rare." Mingjue didn't clear up his doubts, his brows still tightly furrowed, like he was stretching out his spiritual sense to sweep around. Then, the old man's tone changed, and he said emotionally, "But this time, it's all thanks to Mr. Mingjue. If it wasn't for Mr. Mingjue's blood origin finger spirit technique, I would have died. If you didn't use the God Talisman Spirit Chi technique, I would have been fooled and thought that this place really only had a small grade 1 mine. Hee. No wonder that Shi Lianhai would spend so much effort to fight with me. They have mobilized more than 500,000 soldiers and invited dozens of innate masters to attack my Fenghua city. This time I really have to thank Mr. Mingjue." Hearing those words, Mingjue was a little distracted, smiling reservedly. "There's no need to thank me. Our demon flag sect isn't helping the city lord for nothing. As long as City Lord Do remembers the agreement from before." Samuraim's eyes flashed. Since this old man who called himself Do Lingzhen was the city lord of Fenghua City, then the Shi Lianhai he spoke of was definitely the city lord of Lianhai City. This demon flag sect had some background. Although it wasn't as strong as the 10 shrines and 19 spiritual houses, its sect strength wasn't weak. The few spiritual lands it occupied added together were no weaker than the last few out of the 19 spiritual houses. The sect also had a few body-forming spirit masters and grandmaster level experts. However, this sect was one of the most authentic demon sections. Do Lingzhen laughed out loud, showing a forthright and straightforward intent. "Of course. This stone mine should be above grade 2, a medium grade mine. In the future, all the production will be split 80-20. Fenghua City will take 20, your demon flag sect will take 80. We won't go back on our words. However, that Lianhai City and the hidden sword villa behind it still need your sect to help me force them back." The last few sentences were obviously filled with probing intent. Mingjue scoffed coldly, not knowing whether to agree or disagree. He suddenly grabbed out with his hand, grabbing a few monster race members with tiger stripes in front of him. A few claw chains shot out from his sleeves, grabbing and lifting, breaking open their skulls. Within their brains, there seemed to be blood-colored bugs twisting and turning. Mingjue used a spell and the heads of these few monster race members instantly burned with blood flames. All of a sudden, the entire hole was filled with painful cries. In just a moment, the blood flames spread all over their bodies. In Mingjue's hand, there was a ball of bloodlight that circled around his palm. A few breaths later, Mingjue's eyes were filled with disappointment. "Weird, I checked before and the ore core was nearby. However, after using the blood essence finger spirit technique several times, I still can't determine the direction." He looked behind him, worry flashed across his brows. "There aren't many materials left, at most I can cast it twice. If I can't find it, I can only give up." Do Lingzhen's brows furrowed. "If Mr. needs blood spirits, there are many starving people outside of Fenghua City who have no way to survive. Just let Mr. use them. I will accept City Lord Do's good intentions. However, my blood essence finger spirit technique isn't so simple. Mingjue shook his head expressionlessly. The blood spirit sacrifices this technique requires must have a certain cultivation. The stronger the spiritual nature of the material, the more effective it is. This is why these monster race members are the best. These people have merged with the bloodline of ancient god beasts and are preserved perfectly. Using them to cast the technique is the best choice. So that's the case. Dolingjin was enlightened and then broke out into a laugh. Speaking of which, these monster race members are really amusing. They don't want to be good people, but they want to work with those beasts and merge with the essence blood of god beasts. Aren't they no different from animals? Even their personalities are similar to those beasts, violent and barbaric. Speaking of which, I have always found it weird why the sects don't work together to wipe out these monsters. Before he finished, the mythic masters around all burst out into laughter, filled with mocking intent. Chu Shui's body was already trembling when she heard that, unable to control herself, and at this moment she nearly exploded from rage. Her eyes were filled with flames, but also some sadness and helplessness. Zhong Shou was also silent. Based on the records, during the Cloud Desolate era, the ancient human race didn't have an advantage. Numerous beasts roamed the Cloud Desolate era, and there were also alien races that invaded. During the early stages of the Cloud Desolate era, the human race was nearly wiped out. Some of the human experts weren't willing to die, so they merged with the essence blood of various god beasts, barely turning the situation around. After tens of generations, the descendants of these people, as well as the experts that joined in, had billions of casualties. Only then did the human race become the ruler. Chapter 141. In the early days of the Cloud Desolate era, the human race was nearly wiped out. Some human experts weren't willing to die and merged with the essence blood of various god beasts. Only then did they barely turn the situation around. After tens of generations, the descendants of these people, as well as the experts who joined in, had hundreds of millions of death. Only then did the human race become the ruler of the world. However, the human race of the cloud world was only peaceful for 100 years before they started to reject those who merged with beast blood, seeing them as aliens. They were either killed or captured as slaves. Only when the monster race became independent and formed their own race did the situation turn for the better. However, the situation only turned for the better. There were still many human race cities that hunted and killed the monster race. From the end of the Cloud Desolate era to before the God Emperor era. In the short span of 10,000 years, the number of clans had decreased from 774 at their peak to 423. A total of 300 races were hunted down and wiped out in these 10,000 years. The remaining monster race were looked down upon by numerous people and treated as livestock. After 10,000 years, the monster race that died in the hands of the human race could be counted in the hundreds of millions. In such a situation, how could Chushue not be furious and sad? He had the identity of the monster king prince, and had Gantian Mountain to rely on. Even if the human race looked down on him, they didn't dare to show it. They also couldn't show any disrespect, so he didn't feel that kind of discrimination. Only now did he deeply understand the disdain and animosity that spread amongst the humans, as well as the helplessness and sadness of the monster race. They were like trapped beasts, their situation worsening day by day, with no way out. If 10,000 years ago, those human race experts who fought against the fate of being wiped out and merged with the god-beast bloodline knew that their descendants would face such a tragic situation, who knows what they would think? Would they sacrifice themselves for the lives of others to merge with the god-beast bloodline? Would they fight to the death with those beasts and alien races, causing their descendants to be scolded as animals and hunted down and humiliated? Suddenly, a depressed feeling gathered in his chest. Zhong Shou sighed helplessly, rolling his eyes as he looked at the stone wall above in a daze. In his last life, he was born in the human race. Occasionally, when he looked at those historical records that were changed beyond recognition, he would sigh sadly for the monster race. However, at most, he felt some pity for them. He had no intention of overturning the case for them. However, his current body was a half-monster, the prince of the Gantian Mountain Monster King, the future master of millions of monster race. In just 150 years, the entire Cloud World's monster race was nearly wiped out. He didn't have the heart to turn the tide of the Cloud World around for the monster race. However, at that time, how could Zhong Shou stay out of trouble? Speaking of which, this Dou Lingjun was so cruel and heartless to his own race, his own people. There was no need to think about his attitude towards the demon race. It was said that the demons were cruel, bloodthirsty, and aggressive. However, this Fenghua City Lord Dou Lingjun wasn't much better. One could even say that he was worse than an animal extinction. Mingjue shook his head and curled his lips in disdain. If the demon race is really extinct, where will our demon flag sect find such good blood spirit materials? Nearly 20% of the devil sect's techniques required the bloodline of the demon clan's divine beast. Don't let my master hear your words. Otherwise, you will definitely be reprimanded. So that's the case. Dou Lingjun didn't feel awkward, laughing involuntarily before his expression changed. Speaking of the monster race, I thought of something really funny. Just yesterday, a Xiantian master came to my door and sent over many beast crystals, a few of which were actually grade 5. He said that he was ordered by the Gantian Mountain Monster King Prince to buy grain to give those rioters a way to live. Mr. Mingjue, don't you think it's funny? Was there something wrong with this Demon King's son's brain? Recently I was worried about the army gathering and not being able to spend enough, so someone sent the money over himself. Unfortunately, Shi Lianhai, that dumb fellow, also got some beast crystals and was prepared to send people to the nearby cities to buy rice to prepare to open the granary. I can't just keep everything to myself. Although those lowly commoners are annoying, they are still useful. His words were filled with mockery. Zhong Shou acted like he didn't hear anything, sitting quietly. On the side of Mingjue, his brows furrowed, showing a wary expression. Gantian Mountain Monster King Prince? The son of Zhong Weiran, the legendary dual meridian Zhong Shou? It is that trash. Dou Lingjun nodded his head, a dark and vicious expression appearing in his eyes. Is Mr. Mingjue interested in doing this with me? Since this person can take out so many beast crystals, he definitely has many on him. After the matter, we can push the blame to Shi Lianhai. Even if this matter is leaked, with Demon Flag Sect supporting you, I can join Yunxia Mountain or Blazing Flame Mountain. No matter how strong Gantian Mountain is, they can't do anything to you and me. When he heard that, Zhong Shou instinctively grinned, thinking to himself that this Dou Lingjun was really a vicious person with a bandit nature. He really didn't have any morals at all. Before this he was scolding the monster race, and now he wanted to seek protection from them. Chu Shui was so furious that her lungs nearly exploded, her right hand pressing on her sword, her beautiful eyes filled with killing intent. She really wanted to jump down and slice that Dou Lingjun into millions of pieces. Mingjue was obviously tempted. After taking in a deep breath, he shook his head slightly. This matter has many implications. Let's talk about it later. We need to plan. If we want this matter to be flawless, we need to make some preparations. The ball of blood light in his hand spun for a full 10 minutes, but it still didn't point out a direction. Then, it slowly dimmed. When it finally shattered, it let out a soft, peeling sound. Numerous blood droplets splattered all about. At the same time, the demon corpses that were burning with blood flames also collapsed and turned into fine powder. Mingjue scoffed softly. His face was really ugly, like his vital energy was greatly depleted. However, he didn't care. that claw chain once again piercing out from his sleeves and pulling a demon raccoon race teen in front of him. Then, he directly tore apart the clothes of this monster race young girl and fiercely bit down on her neck. His hands weren't idle, moving up and down her body. The more this teen struggled, the more excited Mingjue was, blood appearing on his face once more. The people around, including Dolingjin, didn't care. They all looked away, giggling as they turned their gazes to the side. Seeing that demon raccoon race girl's body turn ashen white at a visible rate, Chu Shui's eyes were about to pop out of their socket. She wanted to pull out her sword several times, but she suppressed it. She could only close her eyes and bite her lips, causing a thread of blood to seep out. She wanted to save her, but she couldn't take it anymore. However, she knew that if she acted carelessly, she would drag down her young master. The only thing she could do was to not see it. Zhong Shou at the side laughed silently. Almost at the same time, the 3 stone puppets loosened their limbs and fell down with a loud rumble. A black sword light mixed in the dust and sand, stabbing towards where Mingjue was. Dolingjin scolded and insulted him, but he didn't care. The 2 of them colluding to kill and rob him, he was too lazy to bother. However, at this moment, he wasn't willing to sit still and not look on. He didn't know any theories and didn't care about his life or death. He only knew that at this moment, he just needed to pull out his sword. If he wanted to pull out his sword, if he was angry he would kill. Why did he need a reason? He didn't feel pity, nor did he feel rage. In his heart, he just wanted to see blood and kill. That sword light arrived in front of Mingjue in the blink of an eye. Dolingjin was first shocked, but then he reached out with a palm to grab the black wave sword. Where did this scoundrel come from? He hollered, his voice shaking the entire tens of miles of the hole. More and more sand and sand fell down. The sound wave also caused the sword attack of the black wave sword to slow down. Dolingjin's hand, on the other hand, emitted countless earthen yellow energy. Like a giant claw, it slapped down towards the black wave sword. However, just as it was about to hit, the black wave sword in the air suddenly turned illusionary and collapsed. At the same time, another black flying sword appeared 30 feet away. Dolingjin's pupils constricted, that giant yellow claw stretched out once more and continued to slap over. The sword shadow flashed and spun, easily avoiding it. However, with that moment of delay, Mingjue reacted. He tossed the demon raccoon race girl to the side, crazily retreating. The tens of talismans in his sleeves shot out like they didn't cost any money. Then, in his field of vision, the black sword shadow made an extremely ingenious turn and circled around the naked girl's body. The sword light changed, either avoiding or forcefully piercing through. It was still nimble and elegant, sharply and swiftly stabbing over. At this moment, there was 1 martial ancestor and 2 Xiantian masters nearby. However, no one was able to help. Mingjue cried out unwillingly, tossing out a golden pill. Just as the sword light was about to reach his body, a golden thin layer exploded out. However, before the golden glow covered his body, that black sword light had already sliced and sliced. It sliced off his entire left arm. Blood splattered everywhere, and a wail of anguish suddenly resounded through the pit. Dolingjin's face instantly turned green, following the spinning sword light as he looked over. Killing intent exploded out in his eyes. Who are you? You dare to ambush us here? Those mythic masters all took out their bows, pointing at where the dust was, their eyes sharp. Mingjue, whose arm was cut off, had a venomous expression on his face. Zhong Shou sighed. He knew that the terrain of this hole was the worst for people like him. Being shot by tens of strong bows, no matter how strong he was, it would be tough for him to handle. Furthermore, his cultivation was average, not even Xiantian. Amongst these people, there was even a martial ancestor who was only a little weaker than Li Yaling. With a self-mocking scoff, Zhong Shou stepped out of the smoke, his hand holding the hilt of the lightning-toothed sword as he looked across expressionlessly. Only in the depths of his eyes was a hesitant expression. His chances of winning today's battle weren't high. Even if he could win, it would be a Pyrrhic victory. He would be fine, but Chu Shui would be heavily injured. The only way to win was the sword that he had sealed for 10 years, the death of the Styx River. Chapter 142. The dust slowly dissipated, and Mingjue and the other mythic masters could finally see the two people within. Doulingzhen had already frowned. As a martial ancestor expert, his eyes were as sharp as an eagle's. When true qi and spiritual energy gathered in his eyes, he could see everything within a few miles. Just dust couldn't block his vision. He was slightly confused, but in the next moment, when his eyes swept across Zhong Shou's face and the cat ears on Chu Shui's head, he was shocked. "You are that Gantian mountain prince?" That face was a little familiar. Not long ago he had seen it on the portrait that the Yunxia mountain people sent over. Even tens of breaths ago, he was planning to steal the treasures that this person brought with him. Who knew that in just a short moment, this person would be in front of him? He couldn't help but feel delighted. Wasn't this mine the best place to kill? Following which he felt a little confused. The teen in front of him had no internal energy or soul power. As the rumors said, he was a dual meridian trash who couldn't cultivate. But the spiritual sword that sliced off Mingjue's arm could only be done by a spirit master who could drive artifacts into the air. The 3 stone puppets were comparable to a 9 meridian mythic master, and they also needed to be above the out-of-body realm to be able to use them. He instinctively thought that the tiger cat race teen beside him was controlling them. But looking closely, he realized that this girl was only a peak 9 meridian mythic master. The soul power that she gave off was normal, not even at the spirit cultivation realm. Then who was controlling the spiritual sword and the 3 stone puppets? Instantly, a bunch of questions rose up in his head. Mingjue was startled, looking closely at Zhong Shou's face, flames burning in his eyes. And when his gaze swept across Chu Shui, his eyes lit up. Touching the wound on his left arm, Mingjue's face couldn't help but twist, laughing viciously. "Why do you care who he is? That guy, capture him alive. I want him to burn for 10 days until he dies, to ease the hatred of my broken arm. I also want that girl. My devil spirit flag just so happens to lack a blood thrall." Hearing this, Doulingzhen suddenly came to his senses and laughed involuntarily. It didn't matter who was controlling the spiritual sword and the 3 stone puppets, or what was strange about them. As long as they were captured, why should they care so much? His eyes shone brightly as he casually made a hand gesture. The 20 strong bows behind him gave out a series of pling-pling sounds. 20 huge arrows as thick as fingers pierced through the air. In just 10 breaths of time, several powerful and sharp arrows were shot out of the bow. Following closely behind were the 2 Xiantian martial masters. He was wearing heavy iron armor, but his movements were like a nimble cat running through the mountains. His movements were gentle and swift. While guarding against the black wave sword that was flying in the air, he quickly approached. When the arrows hit the 3 stone puppets, stone fragments immediately swirled in the air. One after another, a series of ding-ding-dang-dang-dang sounds could be heard. The force of the arrows caused the puppet's huge body to continuously retreat. Chu Shui's eyes couldn't help but be filled with worry. However, Zhong Shou, who was beside her, was still in a daze, not reacting at all. Another 10 arrows struck over, and the 3 stone puppets were full of holes, unable to block them all. Only the stone slab was extremely firm, but it could only deflect away a small portion of the arrows. Chu Shui was instantly anxious, instinctively wanting to block in front of Zhong Shou. However, just as she moved, she was grabbed by a strong hand. When she turned her head, she saw that Zhong Shou was smiling as he looked forward. The hesitation in his eyes had long since faded away, and only a trace of helplessness and cold determination remained in his eyes. Chushue's mind relaxed, but she was also stunned. The current Zhong Shou gave her a different feeling. In the past, no matter if he laughed or scolded her, she would feel really close to him. However, at this moment, although Zhong Shou was still smiling, in her eyes, he didn't seem like a living person. He seemed to have no emotions and was exceptionally cold. Suddenly, she felt a chill down her spine, only to feel that the surrounding temperature had suddenly turned dark and cold. The wind in the hole was originally really cold, but it wasn't as chilling as now. Her blood and vital energy felt like it was about to freeze. In the next moment, she heard Zhong Shou say expressionlessly, "Shui, close your eyes." Chu Shui was startled. At this moment, she could die in an instant, so how could she close her eyes? She didn't have the ability to fight blindly. Her eyes hesitated for a moment, but Chu Shui still closed her eyes. Just now, Zhong Shou's voice was exceptionally solemn and serious. Anyways, no matter what, she would listen to her young master's orders, no matter if she lived or died. Her eyes darkened, and there was a clanging sound by her ear. Chu Shui tried to use her mind to discern. It was the sound of the lightning-toothed sword coming out of its sheath. This incomplete spiritual weapon was wrapped up by little gold, and it actually boiled up and hung in mid-air. Then, Zhong Shou's voice rang out once more. "Remember, without my instructions, don't open your eyes. Don't open your eyes." Chu Shui was startled once more. What was going on? Why couldn't she open her eyes? Her heart sank and a bad feeling rose up. If it was her young master, he knew that he couldn't win and was prepared to go all out against these people. He didn't let her look to protect herself. All of a sudden, Chu Shui's heart was in a mess. Her eyelids moved slightly, struggling. At this moment, Zhong Shou didn't have anything else in his mind. He wasn't willing to use this sealing sword. However, with the situation today, he had no choice but to use it. Sighing, the cold power around him instantly became much thicker. The moss on the sides of the underground stream also started to wither. Numerous death energy wrapped around his right hand. Yellow spring dead water, blue sky cold waves. Zhong Shou gave out a light shout, his hand reaching out. When he reached the lightning-toothed sword, his right hand had already turned ashen white like a dead person. He didn't have any signs of life at all. The 3,000 strands of hair on his head, from top to bottom, all turned white in an instant. When the true qi surged out, there was a soft zheng sound. On the lightning-toothed sword, threads of lightning flashed. The world-shocking true energy wrapped around fire and water seeped out from the tip of the sword. It merged with the ashen white energy. There was no disharmony and no rejection. The water of the yellow springs and the waves of the blue sky were formed by the qi of death. The death energy was mixed with the laws of the heavens. Anything could lead to death. Be it the 5 elements of metal, wood, water, fire, earth or light, darkness, yin, yang, wind, lightning. No matter which one it was, they all contained the power of death. Which was why there was no disharmony. Instead, they resonated with one another and merged together like milk. Zhong Shou's light shout continued. The sword light waved, bringing with it a gray shadow. The cold power and the ashen white death energy seemed to have turned into the nether river, surging and flowing in this underground space. River gathering, 9 underworld gate. This sword connects to the underworld, announcing your death. Along with this voice, Zhong Shou seemed to have disappeared from this world. He merged into one with the nether river. At this moment, apart from Chu Shui, who was hesitating whether or not to open her eyes, the first to feel the change in Zhong Shou were the 2 Xiantian masters, who were originally filled with killing intent and had vicious expressions on their faces. Their pupils constricted, revealing a look of terror. However, at this moment, the gray sword shadow suddenly went from being extremely still to extremely moving. Purple lightning flashed. This sword seemed like it didn't have a physical body, piercing out from the underworld and arriving in front of their eyes like a ghost. Even the heavy armor on the bodies of the two Xiantian masters was useless. They couldn't even sense it, as the armor on their necks was pierced through like rotten bamboo. Following which, their necks felt the cold intent of the weapon. All of a sudden, they were terrified. When they came back to their senses, the person whose body was wrapped in ashen-white death energy had already passed through the gap between them without any hesitation. A short moment later, they were shocked to realize that they weren't dead. There was no blood seeping out from the wound on their neck. However, just as the two of them were delighted and looking at one another, they were both startled as they looked at one another. They saw that the person opposite them was withering and drying up at a shocking speed. Not only did he have no strength left, but his skin was also instantly aging and even swiftly rotting. The entire process was frightening to the extreme, and it also made people feel despair. There was only one thought left in their hearts. What sword was this? So terrifying, so overbearing? Zhongshu's body was still speeding forward. Using the power of the external pill, one leap was 100 feet. The sword's shadow flashed and easily deflected all the arrows that were shot over. 1,000 feet of distance was covered in just an instant. Doulingzhen's face was ashen white. Looking at the ashen white sword, his eyes were filled with fear, feeling that the situation was really weird. The ashen white person in front of him seemed to be extremely dangerous. How could the Gantian mountain prince, who was rumored to be a piece of trash, know martial arts? Moreover, he was a dual cultivator and had out-of-body realm cultivation? Where did this movement technique and sword technique come from? So weird? Without having time to think, Mingjue shot out a few talismans right away. They turned into many fire dragons in midair, charging forwards and biting. The claw chains in his sleeves also shot out, wrapping around Zhongshu and grabbing at him. Only to see the ashen white sword flash, and the fire dragons in the sky disappeared without a trace. The second sword was waved out, and those 10 overclaw chains were all used up. In front of that ashen white sword, it was like anything was rotten wood and could be easily sliced apart. Doulingzhen originally pulled out his weapon and slashed down in an overbearing manner. The sharp knife energy directly opened a several-foot-deep mark on the stone wall beside him. Seeing the situation, he took in a deep cold breath. In his memory, there was only one person who could use such a sword technique. Dark Sword. You are Yunxia Mountain's Dark Sword Lu Qing? The moment he said those words, Doulingzhen felt that it wasn't right. Rumors had it that Lu Qing was a muscular male close to 40 years old. However, the teen in front of him wasn't even 15 and didn't seem like he had changed his appearance. And this sword, although he had initial Xiantian cultivation and was barely able to use sword strength. However, what he felt at this moment was a sense of death that directly entered his heart. It was like no matter how the sword's strength changed, no matter how one tried to block it, one wouldn't be able to change the outcome. This sword strike was a few times stronger than the nether sword Lu Qing. To be continued. Chapter 143. Being stunned by the sword intent, Doulingzhen's heart nearly stopped beating, terrified to the extreme. His entire body felt ice-cold, freezing his marrow. Until that gray-white sword stabbed in front of his eyes. Only then did Doulingzhen's eyes regain a bit of focus. He bit the tip of his tongue and spat out a mouthful of blood. The vital energy in his body boiled, like a flame burning to chase out the cold intent. Rage surged like a volcano erupting. What sneaky thing, Taiji Domain's settling knife, die. That knife energy exploded out, filling up the cave. A full 150,000 kilograms of strength gathered on the knife. He took a step forward, and the entire pit shook. Dirt and sand fell once more, like it was about to collapse. When this knife was slashed out, it was enough to split mountains. Within 40 feet, the entire area was covered in an earth-yellow glow. Who cares what evil technique, what sword intent? he was confident that he could forcefully shatter it. However, Zhong Shou's body seemed like it didn't have a physical body, getting close like a ghost. The sword stabbed out like it came from the netherworld, not existing in this world. With a ding, it struck the seven-ring giant knife in his hand, causing sparks to explode. That large knife, which was a grade 2 spiritual weapon, had a giant hole. Dolingjin could only feel that he had lost control of the strength in his body. The blade of his saber slashed to the side uncontrollably. That half-monster teen's body was like a leaf, lightly retreating. The death energy around his body also became thicker and thicker. Dolingjin only felt a sense of loss. At this moment, he was filled with shock as he raised his head and looked over once more. In the next moment, he was attracted by the eyes of that half-monster teen, only to see that those long and narrow phoenix eyes were also filled with a gray-white energy. There was no human emotion at all, totally expressionless, like a death god holding a sickle looking down from above. All of a sudden, Dolingjin didn't even have any thoughts of fleeing, giving up all hope. He was unable to dodge that sword and had no strength to dodge. Like when the sword was slashed out, he was destined to die. He could no longer control the seven-ringed saber in his hand and the chi and blood in his body. Wisps of grayish-white death chi began to spread from the saber into his body. It was incomparably cold, cutting off all of his life force. Even when he tried his best, he was unable to expel it. Coincidentally, the situation of the two Xiantian masters in front of him was reflected in his eyes. Dolingjin couldn't help but take a deep breath. What kind of King evil technique is this? What a strange swordsmanship. Was this person a human or a ghost? Which branch of the devil sect did he come from? Did I see wrongly? Is this really the rumored dual meridian body, the Gantian mountain prince? Just as these thoughts flashed through his mind, Zhong Shou's figure stopped retreating. A sword flashed forward and arrived in front of him. He directly tapped the space between his eyebrows. Similarly, there was no blood-red light. It was as light as a feather as it swept past him like a ghost. With a flash of his figure, he traversed dozens of feet. Sword light scattered everywhere. In a few breaths, a few mythic masters were also tapped on the space between their eyebrows by that gray sword shadow. Without Xiantian's strength, the speed at which their life force disappeared was much faster. In an instant, their bodies were grayish-white and rotting. Mingjue, who was standing behind them, couldn't suppress the fear in his heart. He hollered, driving a round plate. His body flew up into the air, swiftly fleeing into the distance. Zhong Shou didn't chase. A silver glow flashed in his sleeves, and a flying knife shot out. It was tens of times faster than his body. With a flash, it was already behind Mingjue. Mingjue's head was covered in cold sweat. He hurriedly charged to the side, turning into another path. Just as he thought that he had temporarily avoided death, that knife light suddenly spun and struck right at him. Spiritual sense locking, flying knife changing direction. How is that possible? Mingjue cursed out, a golden pearl shooting out from his sleeves, turning into a golden thin film. Just at that moment, that knife suddenly turned illusionary, like it had turned into numerous knives. It pierced through the golden barrier like a hot knife through butter, piercing through his throat. That sharp knife attack didn't reduce in the slightest, pulling him back and pinning him to the wall above. Mingjue was in total despair. The energy on the knife was crazily destroying the meridians in his body. His blood vessels exploded and blood spurted out. Although he wasn't dead, he had no more life force. He was shocked and lost in his heart. Why does this knife have the cloud-shocking god-destroying sword intent? Also, why is that person's sword so terrifying? Is it a branch of the demon sect? Why haven't I heard of it before? Am I, Mingjue, going to die here? How hateful! At that moment, the place was deathly silent. Those mythic masters weren't dead, but they couldn't make a sound. They could only look on in fear at the changes in their companions. As for the monstrous slaves, they were also stunned. They stared fixedly at the scene before them, unable to believe what they were seeing. Chu Shui was really curious. What happened? Why was the cave so quiet? She wanted to open her eyes, but she didn't want to go against Zhong Shou's wishes. She could only put on a bitter face, feeling really troubled. Out of all of them, only Dolingjin could still move. She forced herself to turn around. Her eyes, which were gradually dimming, stared at the white-haired, white-robed figure who stood among the crowd with a long sword in his hand. "Who are you? What's the origin of that swordsmanship?" He knew that he had no chance of living, so he only wanted to know who killed him. Where did the strange swordsmanship that took his life come from? Zhong Shou's expression was still calm, his face ashen white. Only his eyes regained some warmth. After a short while, Dolingjin's eyes showed disappointment. Only then did he sigh. "Didn't you know my identity long ago? As for this sword technique, it is called Styx River Death Announcing. Styx River Death Announcing Sword." Dolingjin was startled, following which he laughed out loud in a maniacal manner. Styx River Death Announcing, as expected, when the Styx River intersects, the sword announces death. When this teen used this sword technique, he was destined to die. However, he was unwilling. Within Fenghua City, there were numerous beauties and wine waiting for him to enjoy. With this grade 2 stone mine, even if he could only get 20% of the output, it was enough for him to recruit troops and expand his army to conquer the world. Why did he have to meet such a monster? Yunxia Mountain also caused a lot of harm. With this prince's sword technique cultivation, 10 years later, who in Donglin Cloud Continent could match up to him? Wouldn't he be even more terrifying than Zhong Weiran? Even if he didn't bump into him this time, a few days later, when he acted, he would die under this person's sword. He felt his last bit of life, his last bit of strength leaving his body. Dolingjin took in a deep breath, suddenly cursing out towards the sky. "God, you are and G cheating me. You want me to die in the hands of this monster. Your ancestors." Zhong Shou's brows furrowed as he glanced at Dolingjin. Although he hated and despised this person, this was the will of the heavens. He also had some grievances. Hearing Dolingjin scold him, he felt really comfortable. Suddenly, he was shocked. Zhong Shou turned his head, only to see that Chu Shui had already opened her eyes. She was startled as she looked at the scenes in front of her. Looking at the corpses in front of her rotting, withering, and then slowly turning into sand and dust before collapsing. When she looked at Zhong Shou, her eyes were filled with disbelief and fear. Zhong Shou laughed awkwardly. This brat couldn't take it in the end. He knew that this situation had a huge impact on her heart. Even if Chu Shui had been through bloodshed and massacring, she still couldn't take it. He looked at his hand. The ashen white energy had already dissipated. The surrounding nether cold power had all retreated a few breaths ago. However, his hand was still ashen white. Although the death energy didn't enter his body, it still affected his body. If one looked carefully, one could see that his skin had aged to the point where he was close to middle age. Luckily, his skin was shedding now. In 3 days, he would be able to recover. This was the price of using the Styx River Death Sword. With his current cultivation, every 8 minutes he used it, he would lose a month of lifespan. The higher one's cultivation, the stronger the death energy gathered and the more lifespan it consumed. Even an ascended ancestor with thousands of years of lifespan wouldn't be able to take it. However, this was secondary. The true price wasn't this. Every time he used the Heart Sutra of the Styx River Death Sword, his emotions would become a little colder. The more he accumulated, the more he would become a person with no emotions. Chu Shui's words made sense. Things weren't split into good and bad. If one used it for good, it would be good. If one used it for evil, it would be evil. However, if the attack itself could affect one's personality, then it would only be a tragedy. This was the essence of evil techniques in his last life. It took him a long time to recover the emotions of a normal person. This sword technique went against the harmony of the heavens. If it was possible, he didn't want to use it in his entire life. He also didn't want Chu Shui to see him looking like a human but not a human, like a demon but not a demon. Sighing, Zhong Shou kept the lightning-toothed sword. At this moment, Little Gold seemed to be affected by the death energy, its body freezing up. Zhong Shou was busy injecting true qi into Little Gold's body to warm it up. Following which, Chu Shui's eyes were filled with worship. "Young master, when your hair is white you are so handsome and cool." Chu Shui learned the word handsome and cool from Zhong Shou, but she didn't know what it meant. However, at this moment, she could only think of these two words to describe her young master. Just as she was thinking about how it would be best if the white hair didn't change back. Just like Zhong Shou's hair. It started from the bun and in a blink of an eye, it turned black. Zhong Shou didn't know whether to laugh or cry, scoffing coldly. He then looked at those monster race slaves, his face turning cold. That demon raccoon race girl had lost her life long ago. Her essence energy was sucked dry by the bright technique, and she only lasted for a few breaths. The situation of the other people also made one's hair stand up. Only to see many blood-colored bugs crawling out of their mouth, nose, and ears. What made one feel depressed was that these people didn't feel anything at all. Zhong Shoxin's heart sunk, ice cold. These were the methods of the demon flag sect. He shouldn't have had any hope. The only thing he could think of was to let these people free themselves quickly. Chapter 144. A giant ball of flame shot out, lighting up the sky. It was similar to the Pill Fountain sect's fire talisman. However, when this ball of flame exploded, it formed a giant heavenward that didn't disappear for a long time. Just below where the flame shone, two carriages were lined up side by side. Beside them, there were tens of strong wildebeests and some people. An old man in his 60s sat on the roof of one of the carriages. His face was hairy, his brows were thick, and his body had tiger stripes. His eyes were like wheels, shining brightly. His aura was really serious, and he looked really majestic. At this moment, his face was really ugly as he looked forward. "Where did your young master go? Why isn't he here? He knows that he is in a killing situation, so why is he running around? Is this how you protect your young master?" In front of the old man stood Yin Yang and Lian Fan respectfully. The former was expressionless and didn't move at all. The latter, on the other hand, was a little awkward. As the coachman, he had the responsibility of protecting Zhong Shou. However, when he finished and rushed back, Zhong Shou was already gone. A full 2 days had passed and there was still no sign of him. Behind the old man was a 30-year-old man. His aura was really strong and his body was really muscular. His face was really dark and solemn, and there was nothing special about him. There were 3 long whiskers by his lips. At this moment they were shaking like they were really angry. On the roof of the other carriage stood Xianyuan Iran and Li Yunyang. When she heard the words of the old man, her brows furrowed as she looked at Li Yunyang with a reproachful expression. "Do you know where the prince went, or at least which direction he went? Why didn't you ask clearly?" Li Yunyang shook her head and pointed to the hills beside as a reply. She felt really bitter in her heart. With that demon's personality, how would she dare to ask? Even if she did, Zhong Shou wouldn't bother. She saw clearly that the young master treated her like a mosquito. He felt disgusted and didn't want to bother about her. Yin Yang was really calm. On the contrary, the old man's eyes were wide open, and he stared so hard that his eyes were a little dry. He scoffed once more and closed his eyes. "Why aren't you speaking? Are you mute?" Yin Yang moved his body and bowed slightly. "Sir, please don't be impatient. I think the young master won't take long to rush back. With young master's abilities, he will definitely be safe and sound. With young master's abilities, how could he be safe and sound? Hu Qianqiu, really don't know what ability the prince has. Before Yin Yang entered the Oblivion Cloud Ocean, he would most probably order that person to protect the prince. However, although that fellow is a Xuanwu ancestor, he is heavily injured. Usually, the crown prince still needs you to protect him. How can you say this so matter-of-factly? The old man sneered and looked at Yin Yang coldly. Can you tell me now? You've traveled thousands of miles and traveled for 20 days and nights just to invite me here. What is it for? You know that although I, Hu Qianqiu, am loyal to King Weiran, I have the responsibility to protect my race. If it's really as you said, then it's fine if you can convince me to support the crown prince. If not, I, Hu Qianqiu, will personally take the prince's life. In case the next Gantian mountain monster king takes his anger out on my iron tiger race? Xianyuan Iren held her breath, her cherry lips trembling, her fists unknowingly clenched tightly. Lianfan and Yin Yang were expressionless and didn't care at all. Even Li Yunyang didn't feel that this threat had a chance of being realized. Her face was filled with anxiousness. Why hasn't that person rushed back yet? Yin Yang smiled and shook his head. Yin Yang doesn't dare to take matters into his own hands. Even if I say it, Sir most probably won't believe me. It's better to wait for the prince to rush back and personally tell Sir. Sir, don't worry, the prince won't disappoint you. Hearing those words, Hu Qianqiu didn't agree or disagree. The middle-aged man behind him burst out laughing. Won't disappoint my father? During these 10 years, the prince has disappointed everyone in Gantian Mountain. What rights does he have to say that he won't disappoint father? Ah, that's right, we don't have much hope, so naturally we won't be disappointed. Yin Yang kept silent and didn't speak. Hu Qianqiu's eyes turned cold as he scolded. Hu Zhongyuan, shut up. No matter what, the prince is my brother Weiran's. If you say anything bad about him, do you believe that I will toss you into the cloud ocean? Hu Zhongyuan was startled, bitterly keeping his mouth shut, his face filled with unwillingness. Hu Qianqiu once again looked into the sky, only to see that the gone word was slowly dimming. He couldn't help but frown. Send out another talisman. Don't stop. Since you want to wait for the prince to return, then wait for him to return. I will wait here for him for half a day. Treat it as me doing something for Brother Weiran. Xianyuan Iren's brows instantly furrowed slightly. To be able to make Hu Qianqiu satisfied, with Zhong Shou's current situation, how would he be satisfied? Was he referring to the Meridian Spirit Pill and the Mysterious Sense Pill? However, that only had a small chance of him being able to cultivate. However, this Hu Qianqiu seemed to have been specially invited by Zhong Shou by Yin Yang. What confidence did he have to be so confident? The gone word flame once again lit up the night sky. At the same time, within tens of miles, everyone was looking into the sky. Zhongling was the same, frowning as she looked into the sky, her eyes filled with confusion. Is this flame talisman really free? What kind of tricks were they playing? Feng Xiao, is there really a Xuanwu ancestor there? Feng Xiao wasn't sure, looking at the Xiantian expert who was quietly riding on a windrider foal with a sword in his hand. Seeing the latter nod his head, he frowned. His aura is like a dragon, like a golden pillar. He has reached the peak of the human world, most probably. This person must be a person with shocking pride to not hide it at all. His strength is most probably not simple. This is the first time I have seen such an arrogant Xuanwu ancestor. He seems familiar, like I've seen him before. Is he the Xuanwu ancestor beside Zhong Shou that day? Zhongling's face was filled with doubt. Taking in a deep breath, she urged the horse forwards. Let's rush over to take a look. Young master, you can't. This person's vital energy is overflowing. There are no signs of him being weak. It most probably isn't that person. Moreover, we don't have any Xuanwu ancestor experts. Feng Xiao hurriedly tried to persuade her, but seeing that Zhongling didn't listen and was already going all out, he could only helplessly urge the horse forwards. Along with the few Xiantian masters around him, they followed. When Zhong Shou climbed out of the hundreds of feet hole, 4 hours had passed. Although he wasn't injured, the Styx River Death Sword took a huge toll on his body. If it wasn't for the lightning phoenix essence in his body, he wouldn't have been able to recover. However, the time was mainly wasted on clearing the traces and destroying the corpses. When he obtained the Darkness Blooming Sirius, he didn't think about this matter. However, now that he had killed these people, he had to deal with it. That Dolingzhen was okay. Although he was a city lord, it was okay if he killed him. Only that Mingjue was a little problematic. He was really clear about the methods of the true demon sections. Within the sect, there were usually many internal conflicts. Occasionally, there would be people who would die. Most of the time, they died due to the methods of their fellow sect members. Survival of the fittest was the most heartless. However, once a disciple was killed by an outsider or died due to sect matters, the revenge wouldn't end until one of them was dead. Thinking back to the dozens of monster race slaves that had already died, Zhong Shou sighed. He didn't know if it was a blessing or a disaster for these people when he acted. It allowed them to be free from torture, but it also directly caused them to die faster. However, this time he did find something good on Mingjue's body. Those demon artifacts and talismans all had their origins and couldn't be used in front of others. However, this item was the only one that didn't matter. When he jumped out of the ground, Zhong Shou had just stabilized himself. He looked at the huge fire-colored Gon word in the sky. Message talisman? Zhong Shou's brows rose up in shock. In the entire Donglin Cloud continent, only Gantian Mountain used the Gon word as a message talisman. In the next moment, he understood. Most probably the person he invited had already rushed over. Calculating the time, it was about time. He couldn't help but smile. The message talisman continued. It seemed like that person couldn't wait any longer. He couldn't stay here for long. The deaths of Dolingzhen and Mingjue couldn't be hidden for long. In just a few hours, it would affect the Fenghua City army. Once one side won, there would definitely be people who would enter the hole to take a look. He didn't waste any more time. Zhong Shou grabbed Chu Shui and dashed forwards, activating the lightning traveling spirit bone to swiftly pass through the mountains. However, after a short while, Zhong Shou's face was filled with helplessness. Chu Shui, how long are you going to stare at me for? Haven't you seen enough? Of course, Shui can't see enough of young master. Chu Shui actually nodded her head confidently. Following which, she revealed a regretful and vexed expression, especially when his hair turned white. He was really handsome. Shui shouldn't have listened to young master, and opened her eyes in advance. Why don't young master use the Styx River Death Sword to change your hair and let Shui see? Young master, Shui begs you. Before she finished, Zhong Shou couldn't take it anymore, smashing Chu Shui's head. You brat, you think this sword technique can be casually used? It seems like I really have to teach you a lesson when I return. You are getting more and more arrogant. Change your mind. Copy that great desolate talisman scripture 200 times before you are allowed to eat. Chu Shui instantly cried out, while Zhong Shou was both angry and amused. In his last life, every time he used this Styx River Death Sword, be it male or female, they all feared him like a demon. Who knew that Chu Shui liked it so much? Was it because of his looks in this life? However, he remembered that he wasn't that ugly in his last life, right? He was a rare guy with a good temperament. Just as he was thinking about all these random thoughts, Zhong Shou suddenly stopped in his tracks, causing the lightning traveling spirit bone to stop as well. His eyes squinted as he looked in front of him. The forest was lush, swaying along with the wind. One couldn't sense anything strange at all. However, from the intent that the rising moon lion sent over, it wasn't like that. Not only was there someone here, but that person had evil intentions. After a long while, there was still no movement. Zhong Shou was impatient, directly exposing the truth with a smile that didn't look like a smile. Friend, do you really think that no one can see you hiding there? Chapter 145. That dense forest was silent for a moment before there was movement. A 20-odd-year-old teen, his face red, looking majestic, wearing a Taoist robe, walked out of the forest awkwardly. However, a moment later, his expression turned cold. Are you Zhong Shou, the Gantian mountain monster king prince? Zhong Shou couldn't help but touch his face, thinking that no matter where he went, people would recognize him. He was really famous. However, this person's robe was a little familiar, and the picture on it seemed like he had seen it before. Suddenly recalling some memories from his last life, Zhong Shou's heart moved. So what? Are you from the mysterious Cloud Spirit sect? I am from the mysterious Cloud Spirit sect. 4th generation disciple, 9th direct disciple Long Batian. That teen's face was cold and arrogant, raising his chin with disdain. Since you know my identity, then you should know why I am here. If you are smart, you will give up on the marriage with Iran. Sister Iran is the daughter of the heavens. How can a dual meridian trash like you touch her? A toad who can't even protect himself. Do you want to eat swan meat? In this world, only my senior master Zhong Han Nishui is worthy of her. Zhong Shou only felt helpless. He was indeed famous. Today, pretty much everyone who met him would step on him and mock him. However, why did the name Long Batian sound so funny? In the future, those novels about the legends of ancient martial artists loved to use such names. What Long Aotian, Long Jingtian, Long Zhentian, etc. It made one feel disgusted. The name was nice to hear and had to be domineering. However, if one read too much of it, one would feel disgusted. However, the mysterious Cloud Spirit sect's disciple recruitment was still the same. The person in front of him looked at least 28 years old, a Xiantian master who had just stepped into the 2nd meridian of the Earth Chakra realm, and he could actually become a direct disciple of the sect. Also, why did this person find him? Even if he wanted to force him to back out of the marriage, he wasn't qualified enough. Originally, Zhong Shou did not want to waste his breath on this person. Just as he was about to make a move, his heart skipped a beat. He decided that it would be better to be patient for the time being. He shouldn't always think of people as bad and should win them over with virtue. Moreover, too many people had died in his hands today. Having made up his mind, Zhong Shou shook his head. I'm sorry. I didn't care about this marriage before, but now I've changed my mind. Whether or not I'm worthy has nothing to do with you. Unless Iran herself changed her mind about this marriage. Otherwise, I, Zhong Shou, can only apologize. Chu Shui also angrily glared at the square-faced youth. She didn't like Li Yunyang, but she liked Xian Yuan Iran. Over the past 10 days, he would give her some pills from time to time. It was very sweet and delicious. Every day after catching the birds, he wouldn't feel sore all over. Long Batian's face flashed green for a moment before he regained his composure. He nodded coldly. Fine. My words have already reached you. It's up to you whether you want to listen or not. I only hope that you won't regret what you said in the future. He waved his sleeves and turned around like he was about to leave. However, just as he took half a step, he suddenly turned around and pulled out his sword. His body was like an arrow leaving the bow, lightning wrapped around his body as he slashed towards Zhong Shou's neck. That sharp sword shadow was also as fast as lightning. When it was in front of Zhong Shou, Chu Shui blinked like she had just reacted. Long Batian's eyes were filled with a fierce glow, his face was filled with vicious joy. Just as he was prepared to enjoy the feeling of the sword in his hand cutting into flesh and bones. Suddenly, Zhong Shou's eyes were filled with a mocking intent. In the next instance, Zhong Shou suddenly disappeared from his eyes. That devilish body turned illusionary and passed under his sword. Then, his chest felt like it was smashed by a giant rock. Purring! The sound was like thunder. Long Bashan's 24 ribs gave out cracking sounds. His entire body was also sent flying backwards, sliding for over 100 feet before coming to a stop. His head instantly felt dizzy. After several breaths, he barely regained some consciousness. He spat out a mouthful of blood, only to feel that his chest and abdomen had been shattered. Those ribs had turned into numerous pieces and pierced into his organs. Just as he was at a loss and didn't know what had happened, Zhong Shou's body floated hundreds of feet and appeared in front of him. Long Bashan's body shook. Only then did he recall the scenes from before. It was this teen who casually kicked him in the chest, causing him to be heavily injured and on the verge of death. Looking at Zhong Shou, he was still smiling warmly, without any warmth at all. Long Bashan's heart tightened. At this moment, this gentle and polite half-monster teen didn't seem weak at all in his eyes. There was only that hidden viciousness, unfathomable strength, and that ruthless and decisive counterattack just now. Following which, a towering rage rose up in his chest. Long Batian tried his best to keep calm, but his face couldn't help but twist. Very good. Zhong Shou, Long Batian, will remember what happened today. One day, I'll make you pay for what you've done. Following which, Zhong Shou smiled, pulling out a lightning-toothed sword. He casually waved it, bringing with it a ball of lightning, like he was testing it out. Long Batian was terrified, following which he laughed coldly. You dare to kill me? I am the 4th-generation disciple of Mysterious Cloud Spirit Sect, the 9th direct disciple Long Batian. Today, our grievances can be said to be personal. However, if you touch a single hair of mine, my Mysterious Cloud Spirit Sect will wipe out your Sky Fox Zhong family. The corner of Zhong Shou's lips curled up. Wipe out the entire Sky Fox Zhong family? Why did it sound so refreshing instead? He really wished that Mysterious Cloud Spirit Sect could help him deal with it so that he wouldn't have to waste his energy. Thinking about that, the lightning-toothed sword in his hand slashed down. The head of the person under his foot instantly separated from his body. Long Bashan's head was tossed into the air. His face was filled with rage and disbelief. This Zhong Shou actually dared to kill him. How was that possible? Also, that movement technique, that kick that he couldn't react to, was obviously Xiantian. How could this Zhong Shou cultivate and be so strong? He should be a dual meridian body, trash that couldn't cultivate. Waving the sword once more, he flung away the remaining blood. The corner of Zhong Shou's lips was filled with a mocking intent. Did this idiot really think that he would let him off? Be it the Tan Qiu in the last life or the Zhong Shou in this life, they both didn't have the habit of letting their opponents off lightly. Especially people who were filled with killing intent and had already attacked. As for the Mysterious Cloud Spirit Sect, it was merely the 3rd strongest spiritual house. How could he be interested in it? However, since that was the case, he needed time to get rid of the corpses. Who knows if he could make it in time? Feeling a slight headache, Zhong Shou suddenly smiled, turning to the forest on his left. Come out yourself, you should have seen enough of this show. Chu Xue had just walked to his side when she was shocked, looking around in shock. Apart from Long Batian, was there anyone else here? This time, the two of them didn't have to wait as a person walked out from the shadows. He held a spear in his hand, his expression uncertain. Chu Xue was startled. You are Purple Lightning Spear Zhong Yuan? She had not only seen this person from afar in Gantian Mountain City. During the auction in Cloud Saint City, they had even met at a close distance. Zhong Yuan didn't reply, the spear tip in his hand trembling, drawing a circle. It was like a coiled-up poisonous snake, guarding against beasts. His eyes were cold as he stared right at Zhong Shou, filled with suspicion, disbelief, and fear. Zhong Shou looked at Zhong Yuan's spear and couldn't help but laugh. You saw the situation just now? Cousin, what do you think? Think? The prince is strong. Zhong Yuan has no chance of winning. Be it Zhong Shi or Uncle Zhong Hao, the people in the race have misjudged you. Zhong Yuan gritted his teeth, his face turning green, but he replied honestly. He then asked, that day, did deceitful sword Ren Qianqiu, mist sword Xie Jun, and rage sword Yun Tao die in the hands of the prince? Yes. Zhong Shou didn't think about hiding this matter. Zhong Yuan's expression couldn't help but become more serious. Then 100,000 blood killer Li Yaling was also killed by the prince? Zhong Shou's brows rose up in shock, feeling a little weird, you know? You saw? I don't know. Zhong Yuan shook his head. That day I was 20 miles away and knew that the Xuanwu ancestor wouldn't be able to rush over in time. I also went to take a close look at that place. Now that I think about it, the only person who can kill Li Yaling is you. The hand holding the spear couldn't help but tremble slightly. His heart nearly jumped out of his chest. Before he was ordered to rush to Cloud Saint City, he didn't think that this trash prince who couldn't cultivate and was seen as the shame of Gantian Mountain was actually such a terrifying person. To be able to personally kill Ren Qianqiu and the other two in less than 60 breaths of time, such combat ability was unrivaled below the Grandmaster level. Thinking about it, at that time in the forest, the only person who had the ability to fight with Li Yaling was this prince. Following which Zhong Shou smiled. You are quite smart. As my father said, not only are you talented in martial arts, but you are also the best in the race. Your brain is also very flexible. Zhong Yuan didn't say a word, holding the spear as he turned around and left. If he only killed deceitful sword Ren Qianqiu, he wouldn't hesitate to draw out his sword. Even if he killed those 3 people, it would only make him more determined to fight. However, after this battle, he also cut off the head of 100,000 blood killer Li Yaling. This prince wasn't a human anymore. As a martial cultivator, it wasn't bad to be courageous and fearless, but one should also have the heart to win every battle. However, if one was stupid enough to challenge him, he wasn't someone one could defeat or look up to. That wasn't bravery, but stupidity. Stupidity that couldn't be compared to water in one's brain. His body flashed as he dashed dozens of feet forward. In the next moment, Zhong Yuan's body suddenly stopped. In front of him, a giant black lion was prostrating in front of him. Its gaze was fierce, its muscles tight, ready to attack, sealing off all his escape routes. Zhong Shou behind him was shaking his head, raising the sword in his hand. How unambitious! Let me see your purple lightning spear. Is it really like what my father said, to be able to prove the ascended realm? Chapter 146. Between the 2 carriages, who knows when a giant bonfire rose up? The sky was already deep into the night, and Hu Qianqiu's face was even uglier. A full 3 hours had passed, but the prince still hadn't returned. Hu Zhongyuan couldn't take it anymore. His brows were filled with impatience. He wanted to open his mouth to speak several times, but in the end, he stopped himself. In the end he scoffed, "Father, I hope you can keep your word and wait for him for half a day." Hu Qianqiu didn't reply, coldly staring at him before continuing to sit quietly. After a short while, he opened his eyes and looked towards a ravine in the distance. "Since young Master Zhongling is here, why not come over for a chat? Do you really think that I am deaf and can't notice you bunch of brats?" When his words landed, 7 miles away, a scoff spread out. Zhongling appeared, bringing Feng Shao and the others behind him as they walked over. Only when they were 100 feet away from the carriage did they stop, choosing a human-sized stone to sit on, laughing coldly. "I didn't plan to hide from you. Sir Hu Qianqiu is an Earth Chakra 8 Meridian Xuanwu ancestor. Without the cultivation of an ancestor, who can hide under your eyes? But Zhongling is a little curious. You and your father have come all the way here. What are you planning with the Crown Prince?" The eyes of Feng Shao, who was following behind him, lit up. Although this young master Zhongling had the temper of a young master, at this time facing Hu Qianqiu, he was really generous and didn't show any fear. No wonder Zhong Shi placed so much importance on him and ordered him to take charge of the situation. At this moment, even that Hu Zhongyuan showed a look of admiration. Plot? Hu Qianqiu laughed, a cold light flashed in his eyes. Since you know that I am plotting with the prince, aren't you afraid that I will kill you? Zhongling scoffed, not bothering at all. If Sir Hu Qianqiu has such intentions, then you can attack. Zhongling won't resist. If you insist on cutting yourself off from my brother, then Zhongling can't do anything about it. Gantian Mountain can't lack your iron tiger race. However, your race isn't the only one. Darren, you should know that you and the Crown Prince are secretly meeting here. My elder brother's family is not the only one who is afraid. Even Zhong Yang and Zhong Xiuan would have doubts in their hearts. I hope that Milord can understand the intricacies within. Hu Zhongyuan frowned and sighed, persuading Hu Qianqiu. Young Master Zhongling has a noble status and is one of the direct bloodlines of the Zhong family. Father, how can you speak to him like that? Hu Qianqiu snorted heavily, wishing he could punch his spineless son with his fist. Killing intent flashed in the depths of his eyes. In the end, he didn't say a word and averted his gaze. Brat, you're quite capable. I don't know if there's anything between me and the Crown Prince. You just need to listen and see. He sighed slightly, filled with endless regret. Even if that Crown Prince had half of Zhongling's ability, he would go all out to help the only descendant of Weiran become the Monster King. Zhongling smiled in disdain and didn't say anything. He happily took out some food and sat on the stone to fill his stomach. While eating, he glanced at Xianyuan Iran, who was on the other carriage. His eyes were filled with venom and also greed. At this moment, Xianyuan Iran's fingernails were digging deep into her flesh. Using the piercing pain, she barely suppressed the anxiousness and uneasiness in her heart. She stared at the hills in the distance, wishing that Zhong Shi would never appear here. Li Yunyang's expression was also dark and sunny, worry appearing in her eyes. However, what she was worried about was different from Xianyuan Iran's. Hesitating for a moment, Li Yunyang took in a deep breath and made a decision. Little Miss, can you leave with Yunyang? Yunyang has something to report to Little Miss. Xianyuan Iran's brows furrowed. She didn't care and continued to look at the hills. What is it that you can't say here? Li Yunyang shook her head slightly, her tone cold. It concerns my Xian mountain city and your parents. These words can't enter the ears of others. It will only take a moment. My parents. Only then did Xianyuan Iran's mind jolt, turning around somewhat suspiciously. Is this true? Seeing Li Yunyang's serious expression and determined eyes, Xianyuan Iran bit her lips. Xianyuan Iran bit her lips and hesitated for a moment, but she still leaped up and moved to the side. Li Yunyang's mind immediately relaxed. She looked at the hill with a complicated expression. Following which he rose up and followed closely behind Xianyuan Iran, flying in that direction. Looking at the two of them slowly disappear from his field of vision, Hu Qianqiu's brows furrowed. What are those two girls doing? However, he didn't care too much. Hu Qianqiu raised his head and looked at the sky before turning towards Yin Yang. His voice was cold as he questioned, half the time has passed. I, Hu Qianqiu, always do what I say. Since I said I would only wait for half a day, then I won't wait for a moment longer. An hour later, no matter how you beg, I will immediately return to Gantian Mountain. Yin Yang, you need to know that it isn't that I don't care about the ruler's feelings. It is that the prince doesn't have the fortune and is late. Accompanying you on this trip is already the best I can do. Sir, don't be rash. Yin Yang's expression was still expressionless and filled with confidence. I don't know whether or not the prince can rush back. I only know that if you miss today, you will regret it for the rest of your life. Hu Qianqiu's eyes widened, a look of shock appearing in his eyes. Yin Yang's tone, even at this moment, didn't reveal any panic. His tone was really confident, like he didn't care if he stayed or left. Forget about this Yang. This Lian Fan wasn't from Gantian Mountain. Why was he like that? Not only was he willing to serve under Zhong Shou, but he also seemed to be proud of it. He couldn't help but be curious and look forward to it. Maybe the son of his old friend could give him a surprise. Hu Zhongyuan, who was at the side, had a different feeling. Shameless boasting. My father shouldn't have made this trip. After mocking, Hu Zhongyuan looked to the side and saw Zhongling and the others chewing on dry rations. His face sunk as he waved his sleeves to the side. Instantly, there were a few servants beside the bonfire who understood. They carried 2 freshly barbecued wild tooth boars in front of Zhongling. They also raised a bonfire beside the stone. Zhongling didn't reject, directly taking off a hind leg and biting into it. Instantly her mouth was filled with oil, the taste was really fresh. She couldn't help but nod towards Hu Zhongyuan gratefully. The latter also smiled. While he relaxed in his heart, he was quite pleased with himself. He thought to himself that his father was old and cared too much about his relationship with the ruler. The future of the Iron Tiger race still needed to be planned by him. Although that prince was the ruler's direct son. But with a dual meridian body, how could a piece of trash take up the position of Monster King? His father was really old and muddle-headed. Not only was young Master Zhong Shi one of the direct bloodlines of the Sky Fox Zhong family, but he also reached Xiantian at the age of 20. The few hidden sects in Donglin Cloud Continent all wanted to take him in as a direct disciple, so he should be what Gantian Mountain relied on. In this chaotic world, only the strong could survive and ensure that Gantian Mountain didn't lose their foundations. Tens of miles away, a battle had already ended. The entire process took less than 10 minutes before it came to an end. Zhong Yuan's face was covered in dirt, his body lying on the ground unable to move. However, he could still speak. Why didn't you kill me? Why did you show mercy? With your sword technique, if you wanted to kill me, you wouldn't even need 10 breaths. What a huge humiliation. If I die, then I die. I, Zhong Yuan, don't need you to show mercy. Zhong Shou smiled slightly, keeping his sword back into the sheath. The purple lightning spear that this person used was really not bad. Like what Zhong Weiran said, this person had hopes of reaching the ascended realm. It wasn't referring to the time when the spiritual wave rose, but when the spiritual energy was low. His talent could be compared to some direct disciples of the big sections. Unfortunately, his spear technique was too messy, not forming a system, which reduced his points. Suddenly having an idea, Zhong Shou smiled and asked, "Your purple lightning spear was created by yourself?" This spear technique was also self-taught. Zhong Yuan was startled, his face dimming as he scoffed coldly. "I'm not your direct disciple, so how can I learn any good martial arts? Those big sects are worried about me being a disciple of the Zhong family, so they won't easily accept me. Apart from creating it myself, what else can I do? Hey, if I had your conditions, the person who lost today might not be me. I would definitely be able to kill you under my spear." Samuraim's eyes lit up, and his impression of this person rose by a few notches. This fellow's strength was similar to that of deceitful sword Rin Qianqiu. Although he had talent, he was on the same level as the 100,000 blood assassins. He automatically skipped over the latter part of his sentence. Zhong Shou casually waved his hand, and on his palm, a lightning glow shone. He smiled. "Speaking of the Sky Fox Zhong family, I, Zhong Shou, am actually from a branch. We should work together against a common enemy. If you feel regretful, I have a lightning technique here. If you are willing to follow me, I don't mind passing it to you." Zhong Yuan's expression changed slightly, showing that he was tempted. Following which he tilted his head and spat out, "You should just kill me. Zhong Yuan would rather die than be a traitor." Zhong Shou couldn't help but smile. "Cousin, you are such an honest person. Why don't you even know how to pretend to be polite? If you follow me temporarily, won't you be able to keep your life and also learn this technique? Looking to the side, he saw that Long Baishan's corpse had already been dealt with by Chu Shui. She directly caught a few beasts and didn't need to rush them. Long Batian was eaten up cleanly, not leaving a single trace. At this moment, he only left behind some of his belongings. Chu Shui had been with him for a few months, and she was getting more and more skilled at destroying the corpses and evidence. Zhong Shou smiled and looked towards the direction of the flames. He had wasted so much time because of these two people. That Hu Qianqiu was said to be impatient, would he get impatient? It was best to rush over quickly. Chapter 147. With Chu Shui carrying the tied-up Zhong Yuan, the three of them continued to run towards where the flames rose up. This time, there weren't any unexpected changes. The few tens of miles took around 15 minutes to rush over. Before they even got close, Zhong Shou's brows furrowed, following which his lips curled up. This time all the people from Gantian Mountain came. Not only did the person he invited come, but even Zhongling came uninvited. Even this Zhong Yuan had fallen into his hands. He felt Hu Qianqiu's intent reach over. Zhong Shou broke out into a laugh, stopping the lightning traveling spirit bone, only using his full strength to walk over. At this moment, the rest of the people had already sensed it and all of them looked over. Yin Yang and Lian Fan's faces were filled with joy. As for Hu Zhongyuan and Zhongling, their faces were filled with disdain. The latter instinctively mocked. You actually dare to run around at such a time. Zhong Shou, you really are the son of the ruler, really bold. Aren't you afraid of dying in the hands of Yunxia Mountain or Blazing Flame Mountain? As he said that, he suddenly stopped, looking at Zhong Yuan who was tied up like a dumpling, being carried by Chu Shui with one hand. After being stunned for a moment, he burst out laughing. Zhong Yuan, who knew that your purple lightning spear would have such a day? Weren't you arrogant in the past? Why are you in such a bad state today? How did you get captured by my cousin? Did you offend him and cause that person to act? You knew that fellow was protecting my cousin, aren't you a little too dumb? Zhong Yuan's face turned green, scoffing, too lazy to reply. He looked at Zhongling like he was looking at an idiot. Originally, he wanted to remind him to let this fellow run and spread the news. At this time, however, he didn't want to say anything, thinking that it wouldn't be long before you would cry. Zhong Shou raised his eyebrows when he heard this. This was not the first time he had sensed the existence of the black turtle ancestor. In his heart, he was also filled with doubts. Why didn't this person show himself? That day when he fought with Li Yaling, why was he so late? And why did he retreat halfway? Why didn't Yin Yang know the details of this Xuanwu ancestor? Judging from their conversation, they seemed to know something about that person. Once today's matter was settled, he would carefully interrogate this Zhong Yuan Zhongling. This was especially so for the latter. Cloud Saint City had only let him go because of his misgivings. Today there was no reason for him to let him slip away under his nose. This fellow had simply become a dog-skin plaster, unable to be shaken off. There was also Chu Shui. For some reason, when she saw Hu Qianqiu, Chu Shui was a little hesitant, hiding behind Zhong Shou. Occasionally, she would sneak glances at Hu Qianqiu and his son, her eyes filled with hesitation, making him feel weird. However, at this moment, he didn't have the time to think about the reason. His thoughts were in a mess for a moment before Zhong Shou retracted his thoughts. Looking at the 60-over-old man on the carriage roof, he didn't need to differentiate to know that this person was Zhong Weiran's right-hand man, the second strongest person in Gantian Mountain, Hu Qianqiu. Be it appearance or aura, it was exactly the same as in his 13 years of memory. It was also at this moment that a strong wolf faintly pressed down on him. Zhong Shou was really calm, his eyes calm as he exchanged glances with Hu Qianqiu before slightly bowing. "Hello, Uncle Hu. Within 10 days and nights, I have troubled you to rush here from so far away. Uncle, who must have had a hard time, Zong Shou is really grateful. 3 years of not seeing you, the prince's manners and etiquette are really decent. In terms of hard work, no matter how hard it is for Hu Qianqiu, it can't be compared to Yin Yang. Looking at how Zong Shou wasn't intimidated by his aura, Hu Qianqiu was surprised. Hu Qianqiu was pleasantly surprised, but after looking up and down, his face darkened. It was still the same, no internal energy and no soul power. That made sense. How could a dual meridian body cultivate? Even if he changed to spiritual spells, it would still be difficult. He shouldn't have held any hope. Suppressing the disappointment in his heart, Hu Qianqiu stood up, solemnly bowing. Hu Qianqiu greets your highness. What matter does the prince have for me? Hu Zhongyuan couldn't help but frown, not used to his father being so respectful, especially in front of Zhongling. What ability did this kid have to be treated so respectfully by his father? However, being stared at by Hu Qianqiu, he also stood up and bowed unwillingly. However, his expression was really cold, his eyes cold. That gaze was like a knife, directly cutting over and filled with warning intent. Zong Shou smiled when he saw that, not bothering at all. This time I invited Uncle Hu over because I have 2 matters to trouble you with. Firstly, the Gantian Mountain Monster King position is mine, Zong Shou's for sure. How can my father's legacy fall into the hands of others? Uncle Hu, please lend me a hand. Hu Qianqiu's body shook slightly, his face filled with shock. Hu Zhongyuan only felt that his chest was about to explode from anger, filled with rage. He didn't bother about his father beside him, directly laughing coldly. Prince, you really dare to open your mouth? You really don't know when to back off. You are just a piece of trash and a half-monster. Even if the Monster King position is given to you, can you sit still? Although Gantian Mountain was built by the ruler, it concerns the life and death of the 100 races in the mountain city. Do you really want us to be wiped out by Yunxia Mountain and Blazing Flame Mountain before you are willing to stop? Zhongling laughed, spitting out a piece of bone from her mouth, her expression calm. If you want the Monster King position, then just sit there. No one will snatch it from you? Be it my brother or Zong Yang or Zong Xuan, they don't have any intentions to fight with you. Cousin, it isn't your fault that you can't cultivate, but I didn't expect that your brain would be so dumb. Hu Qianqiu's face twisted, looking really vicious and filled with killing intent. A moment later he sighed, his expression calming back down. But before Zhong Ling could finish his words, a voice rang out. On the other side, Zong Yuan suddenly laughed out loud. He was extremely arrogant and didn't stop for a long time, filled with a mocking intent. Zhongling's words were interrupted and she was unhappy, thinking to herself that Zong Yuan was crazy? Laughing non-stop? Annoyed, she threw a bone over. What are you laughing at? What's so funny? I think your purple lightning spear is dumb. That bone had true energy as it slashed through the air, bringing with it a whistling sound. Chu Shui didn't want to help Zong Yuan block, allowing that bone to hit his face. Zong Yuan didn't feel any pain, his laughter stopping, his tone turning cold. Zhongling, do you remember that day in Cloud Saint City? Who was the dumb one in the end? Today's matter is also amusing. You scolded me to your heart's content, but in a while you will know who the truly dumb one is. Let's just hope that at that time, Zhongling, you don't cry. Hee, an ant dares to mock an elephant for being short. Forget it, I Zong Yuan am actually similar to you, both amusing and pitiful. I'm too lazy to talk about you. As he said those words, his heart was filled with despair and laziness. As for the people present, they were all baffled when they heard this and were extremely puzzled. Only Yin Yang had a smile on his face. Lian Fan slightly shook his head, his face filled with disdain. Apart from the 2 of them, out of everyone, only Feng Zhao's heart tightened, instinctively feeling that something wasn't right. Zhongling laughed coldly, not bothering about Zong Yuan's words, treating it like a mad dog barking. His cousin could only rely on a heavily injured Xuanwu ancestor. This person wasn't even sure if he would survive, so what kind of waves could he cause? Hu Qianqiu's heart was heavy, thinking about what to say before he expressionlessly shook his head. Your Highness, after the ruler disappeared, the reason why I didn't rely on him and rushed here within these 10 days and nights was because of the ruler's kindness. If the crown prince wants my Iron Tiger clan to. Before he finished, Zhong Shou waved his sleeves. Whether or not Uncle Hu agrees, let's talk about it later. I have a second matter to ask of Uncle Hu. A cold light flashed as Zhong Shou took out the lightning tooth sword once more. Little Gold's body once again covered it, causing the sword body to instantly turn silver white as it pointed towards the carriage. I heard that Uncle Hu's martial path is only below my father in Gantian Mountain. You have a Tiger Overlord knife. Today Zhong Shou would like to ask Uncle for advice. When his voice fell, almost everyone present fell silent. They looked over at Zhong Shou in disbelief. They found it hard to believe that those words came from Zhong Shou's mouth. Zhong Yuan couldn't help but close his eyes. He knew that the final situation would be like this. Following which his eyes opened wide as he stared right at Zhong Shou. He thought to himself that it wasn't bad to be able to watch such an exciting battle before he died. Zhongling also forgot to continue chewing the meat in his mouth wide open, unable to close. This Zhong Shou didn't have any internal energy and actually dared to challenge Hu Qianqiu, a Xuanwu ancestor. Did he hear wrongly? Hu Zhongyuan was also at a loss, not knowing why this Zhong Shou would raise such a suggestion. Hu Qianqiu's brows furrowed, his expression turning cold as he looked carefully at Zhong Shou, his eyes serious. Thinking about it, he said expressionlessly, "Prince, are you serious? Do you know that my blade is always merciless? At that time, I might not be able to stop myself." Zhong Shou didn't say anything, his eyes looking straight ahead. Although no energy leaked out from his body, his mind had entered an extremely quiet and mysterious realm. His heart was clear, his entire person and the sword in his hand seemed to have merged into one at this moment. The other people here didn't feel anything. Hu Qianqiu's eyes lit up, the blood in his chest that was originally as cold as ice started to surge once more. This half-monster teen in front of him, the son of Weiran at this moment, his sword and intent merged. "Idiot, why aren't you going to get my blade?" he suddenly hollered. Seeing that Hu Zhongyuan was startled and didn't react, Hu Qianqiu scolded and directly jumped up beside a windrider foal not far away. Ing. Following this clear ringing sound, a long saber that was about 7 feet long, with a back full of hooked teeth, was suddenly drawn from its scabbard. You're tuning in to the Phoenix Knights YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe and join us on this journey to catch the most captivating stories.